I rose from my chair to express gratitude to my grandmother for a thoughtful $500 gift, and she gazed at me without any expression. Then she declared, her voice steady as frozen steel, that she had wired me $1 million. My mother's laughter erupted too quickly. My brother gagged on his drink. Grandmother murmured softly, demanding to know who had robbed me while seated at her dining table. The most terrifying aspect was not the vanished fortune. It was the realization that someone had orchestrated the perfect deception, and Christmas dinner served as their performance stage. My name is Sloan Merritt, and if my decade working at Pinnacle Crest Security and Compliance in Spokane has taught me anything, it is that the truth typically conceals itself in the pause between two heartbeats. I am 34 years old, and I dedicate my professional hours to unraveling financial deception, searching for the electronic traces left behind by avarice. I follow wire transfers through phantom corporations and study the behavioral signatures of those who pilfer funds while believing themselves cleverer than any detection system. Yet nothing from my professional experience, not one instance of corporate misconduct or stolen identities, could have readied me for the stillness that descended upon my grandmother's dining space in Charleston, South Carolina, on Christmas Eve. The atmosphere inside the residence was saturated with the aroma of roasted turkey, herbed stuffing, and the overwhelming sweetness of my mother's traditional sweet potato dish. It presented a suffocating portrait of the ideal American celebration. The chandelier suspended above us projected a golden luminescence onto the fine porcelain, the collection my grandmother Vivian Ashford retrieved only when she wished to demonstrate that our family remained intact. Everyone present performed their designated functions. There was my mother, Cordelia, draped in a crimson velvet gown perhaps too vivid for the occasion, her laughter emerging a heartbeat too soon at every jest. Adjacent to her sat my stepfather, Garrison, a man who had perfected the skill of dissolving into the background, consuming his meal with mechanical detachment. Across from my position sat my brother Thatcher and his fiancée Bennett Crane. They embodied the ideal couple, projecting a carefully cultivated appearance of prosperity and domestic harmony, though I had observed Thatcher replenishing his wine glass 3 times during the initial hour. And then there was grandmother Vivian at 81. She occupied the head position of the table, a seat she had claimed since my grandfather's passing. She appeared more delicate this year. Her hands, typically so assured when she crocheted or tended her garden, exhibited a faint tremor as she manipulated her utensils, but her eyes remained unchanged, lucid, penetrating, and undeniably perceptive. She had perpetually served as the foundation, the singular individual in this turbulent constellation who made sense to me. I had traveled from Washington State that morning, depleted but resolved to perform the role of the devoted granddaughter. Earlier that evening, amid the destruction of gift wrapping and the manufactured astonishment of present exchanges, grandmother had presented me with a modest envelope. Within it lay a check inscribed to me for $500. It was a sweet customary gesture, travel money, as she traditionally termed it. Despite having flown rather than driven, it felt secure. It felt ordinary, or so I assumed. I determined it was appropriate to deliver the obligatory toast. I tapped my spoon against the edge of my crystal wine goblet. The sharp resonance pierced the subdued conversation. I simply wished to express something, I commenced, rising from my seat. The chair legs scraped gently against the hardwood surface. It brings me such joy to return to Charleston. I recognize that I remain distant in Spokane most of the time, but I genuinely appreciate everyone's presence here. I directed my attention toward the head of the table, especially toward grandmother. Thank you for this meal. It is exquisite as always, and thank you for the Christmas gift. The $500 was excessively generous, and you truly did not need to do that. I smiled, elevating my glass, anticipating the customary responses of agreement or a dismissive flutter of her hand, but the room offered no response. Grandmother Vivian was in the midst of carving a portion of turkey breast as the words, $500, escaped my mouth. Her hand ceased all movement. It was not a casual hesitation. It was a complete termination of motor activity. The blade halted mid-stroke. Her shoulders tightened, securing into an inflexible alignment. She did not examine her plate. She did not observe her food. She deliberately, excruciatingly deliberately, positioned the knife upon the platter's edge. The metal produced a muted sound against the porcelain. She rotated her head to observe me. The warmth I had witnessed in her gaze throughout the evening had dissipated, supplanted by bewilderment that swiftly solidified into an alarming lucidity. "What did you say, Sloane?" she inquired. Her voice was hushed, scarcely a whisper. Yet within the abrupt absence of sound, it thundered. "The check," I responded, faltering somewhat. My investigator's instincts suddenly triggered a warning signal I could not yet classify. The $500. I merely wished to express appreciation. Vivian regarded me. She appeared as though she had never encountered me previously, or perhaps as though she was perceiving me authentically for the initial time. She positioned both palms flat upon the table, steadying herself. "Sweetheart," she uttered, her voice composed as frozen steel. "I wired you $1 million. The silence that ensued was substantial, tangible. It compressed against my eardrums. Time appeared to distort, elongating that solitary moment into perpetuity. I remained standing there, my glass still partially elevated, my consciousness struggling to reconcile the disparity between the document in my pocket and the declaration emerging from her mouth. $1 million. My mother, Cordelia, shattered the silence first. She released a laugh that resembled crystal fragmenting in a disposal unit. It was elevated, breathless, and entirely devoid of genuine amusement. "Oh, Mother," she exclaimed, extending toward her wine glass with a hand that jerked abruptly. "Do not be absurd. You are disoriented. The medication the physician prescribed for your blood pressure causes drowsiness. We discussed this matter." "I am not disoriented, Cordelia," Vivian declared, maintaining eye contact with me. Across the table, my brother Thatcher choked on his beverage. He coughed violently into his napkin, his complexion becoming mottled crimson. It was a visceral response, a body rejecting oxygen. Beside him, Bennett offered no assistance. Instead, Bennett's gaze immediately descended to his lap. I could perceive the azure illumination of a screen reflected in his spectacles. He was examining his phone. He was not startled. He was awaiting confirmation. And Garrison. My stepfather continued staring at his plate, yet his jaw was clenched so intensely I could observe the muscle pulsating beneath his skin. He ceased chewing. I gradually lowered myself back into my chair. The fraud investigator within me assumed control, displacing the bewildered granddaughter. I needed to establish parameters. I needed to identify who would fracture. I adopted the expression I wore during interrogations. Neutral, inquisitive, non-threatening. "Grandmother," I voiced softly, disregarding my mother's frantic gesticulations. $1 million represents a substantial sum. "When did you transmit it?" 14 days ago, Vivian stated. She retrieved her napkin and pressed it to the corner of her mouth, her movements regaining that alarming precision. "I visited the bank. I sat with the manager. I authorized the wire transfer to the account number I have always maintained for you, the one we established when you commenced college. Mother, cease this immediately," Cordelia hissed, her smile now resembling a grimace of suffering. "Sloane, do not heed her words. She has been experiencing these episodes. She confuses matters. She conflates dreams with actuality." "I do not dream about wire transfers, Cordelia," Vivian snapped. The authority in her voice caused Cordelia to physically recoil. Vivian returned her attention to me. "I transmitted it 14 days ago. Sloane, it represented everything. It was the proceeds from the rental properties, the bonds, everything I possessed in liquid form. I wanted you to receive it before circumstances became complicated." "Very well," I responded, maintaining an even tone, serving as the anchor she required. "If you transmitted it 2 weeks prior, I should have observed it. I monitor my accounts consistently." Vivian leaned forward. The candlelight captured the unshed tears in her eyes, but her expression was not sorrowful. It was furious. "That is precisely the difficulty." "Sloane," she whispered. I verified the tracking the following day. The funds arrived, and then within 24 hours, They vanished. The temperature within the room appeared to plummet 10 degrees. Vanished, I echoed. Funds do not simply vanish, grandmother. They relocate. Where did they go? I do not know, she replied. But I am certain I did not relocate them. And I am certain you did not relocate them because you were unaware they existed. Which leaves? She trailed off, her gaze sweeping deliberately around the table. It settled upon Cordelia, then shifted to Thatcher, then lingered on Bennett, and ultimately brushed past Garrison. It constituted an indictment. Grandmother, Thatcher rasped, his voice hoarse from his coughing episode. You are frightening everyone. You probably simply transferred it to savings and forgot. Or perhaps the bank committed an error. You understand how they operate with seniors. The bank did not commit an error, Vivian declared firmly. I possess the receipt. I possess the confirmation code. Where is it? Cordelia demanded, her voice shrill. Where is this receipt? Mother, if you possess it, present it to us. I have secured it, Vivian stated. And the manner in which she uttered secured implied that secured meant away from you. I experienced a frigid knot tightening in my abdomen. This was not senility. This was a specific, detailed accusation, and the reactions surrounding the table confirmed it. My mother was attempting to manipulate her own mother's perception of reality. My brother was deflecting, his fiancée was disengaging, and my stepfather was invisible. Grandmother? I inquired, focusing on the most critical element. Are you absolutely certain you transmitted it to our shared account, the one concluding in 4589? Vivian nodded. Yes. I recognize my own account, Sloan. I wired $1 million to that account, and someone extracted it. Who? Cordelia asked, attempting to sound incredulous, yet failing. Who could possibly extract funds from your account? Someone who possesses access, Vivian stated. Someone who sat at this table and smiled at me while they stole everything I saved for my granddaughter. The accusation suspended in the atmosphere like vapor. Nobody stirred. Nobody consumed food. The Christmas melodies playing softly in the background, crooning of winter wonderlands, felt grotesque against the tension. My thoughts raced. If the funds were wired to a joint account, only 2 individuals should possess access, myself and grandmother, unless there existed a third party. Unless there was a power of attorney of which I was unaware. Unless someone had impersonated one of us. I observed my mother. She was gripping her wine glass so forcefully I believed the stem would fracture. She appeared terrified. But not for grandmother. She appeared terrified for herself. I observed Thatcher. He was wiping perspiration from his forehead. Despite the cool atmosphere in the room, he appeared guilty. But Thatcher perpetually appeared guilty. He was malleable, easily influenced. I observed Bennett. He had finally stowed his phone, but he was staring at the centerpiece with a vacant, hollow expression that I recognized from subjects who understood the net was tightening. Vivian retrieved her knife again, but she did not carve the turkey. She gestured vaguely toward the center of the table. I gave you that $500 check tonight, she addressed me, because I wished to observe what would transpire. I wished to observe who would appear relieved that it was such a modest amount. She directed her gaze toward Cordelia. And you, Cordelia? You exhaled the moment Sloan mentioned $500. I did no such thing, Cordelia protested, her face flushing crimson. You did, Vivian confirmed. You all did. I needed to de-escalate this situation before it erupted into conflict. But I also required evidence. I needed to comprehend the mechanics of the deception. If grandmother believed she transmitted $1 million yet handed me a check for $500, someone had orchestrated a concealment. Someone had likely exchanged the checks or manipulated her into inscribing the smaller one to preserve the illusion of normalcy. I reached into my pocket and extracted the envelope she had presented to me. My fingers brushed against the crisp texture of the check. I withdrew it, maintaining it below the table edge momentarily. Grandmother, I inquired, did you inscribe this check for $500 today? No, she responded, frowning. I inscribed a check for $500 yesterday. I placed it in the card. I wanted you to have something to unwrap, even if the genuine gift had disappeared. Very well, I acknowledged. I raised the check into the illumination, I examined the date, December 24th. I examined the amount, $500. Then I examined the signature line. My grandmother had instructed me in cursive penmanship when I was 6 years old. She possessed a highly distinctive method of signing her name. The V in Vivian always featured a wide, sweeping flourish at the top, and she never connected the Y to the A in Ashford. It was a signature born of rigorous parochial school education in the 1940s. I stared at the dark ink on the check in my hand. The V was narrow and angular. The Y dragged into the A in a messy slur. It was a credible attempt, perhaps sufficient to deceive a teller who was not attentive, or a granddaughter who was intoxicated on holiday spirits. But I was completely sober. I raised my gaze from the check. I observed my mother, then Thatcher, then Bennett. "Grandmother," I declared, my voice barely steady as the realization struck me with the force of a physical impact. "You did not sign this check." Vivian examined me, her eyes wide. "What?" "This signature," I stated, holding it aloft. "It is a fabrication." The silence returned. But this time, it was not the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a trap engaging. Someone at this table had not only stolen $1 million, they had fabricated a check to maintain my silence, assuming $500 would suffice to purchase my gratitude and my silence. They assumed I would deposit it and depart. They assumed I was naive. I examined the faces surrounding me. One of them was a criminal, and I was determined to discover which one, even if I had to incinerate this entire Christmas dinner to achieve it. The fabricated signature on the check represented the final component of a puzzle I had been assembling in darkness for nearly a week. Standing there in the silence of the dining room, holding that document that mocked my grandmother's trembling hand, I experienced a cold, rigid clarity wash over me. The confusion I had feigned earlier had dissipated. The shock was merely a performance for the benefit of the family. In truth, I had entered this residence with a loaded weapon. Metaphorically speaking, I simply needed to determine who to aim it at. My suspicion had not originated with the dinner. It had originated 6 days prior in my apartment in Spokane with a telephone call that felt wrong from the initial ring. It was a Tuesday evening. I was sitting on my floor, surrounded by takeout containers and case files from work, attempting to decompress after pursuing a syndicate of credit card skimmers across state boundaries. When my phone vibrated, the screen illuminated with Thatcher's name. My brother rarely telephoned. We were a text message family, a meme-sharing family. A voice call typically signified someone had died or someone was incarcerated. I answered with a mouthful of noodles, anticipating a crisis. Instead, I received Thatcher's voice pitched an octave too elevated, saturated with a sweetness that set my teeth on edge. "Hey, Sloan," he had stated. "I was just thinking about you. Are you all prepared for the trip?" "Mostly," I replied, setting my chopsticks down. "Why? Do you need me to bring something?" No, he rushed to assure me. "I was actually thinking perhaps you should skip this one. You know, just remain in Washington. Relax." I frowned at the phone. "Skip Christmas, Thatcher. I purchased the ticket months ago. What are you talking about?" "It is just grandmother," he explained, and I could hear him pacing. I could hear the floorboards of our childhood home creaking in the background. "She has been extremely fatigued lately, Sloan. The physician said she needs absolute tranquility, no excitement. Having the entire household full, it might be excessive for her heart. I was thinking perhaps we should all just do our own thing this year." I narrowed my eyes. My grandmother was a woman who, at 79, had reshingled her own garden shed because the contractor was progressing too slowly. The notion that she wanted a quiet Christmas was laughable. She thrived on the noise. She thrived on the chaos of a full table. "Grandmother told me last week she was preparing 3 pies," I stated. She did not sound fatigued to me. "Well, things change rapidly at her age," Thatcher replied. "Mother said the physician told us that." He stopped abruptly. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "I mean, we all heard the physician say it. It is a consensus. We just want what is best for her." "That slip," Mother said, was the crack in the veneer. Thatcher did not care about physicians. Thatcher did not care about stress levels. Thatcher cared about whatever my mother instructed him to care about. He was reciting a script, and he was executing it terribly. "I will take my chances," I responded, keeping my voice light. "I will be quiet as a mouse. See you soon, Thatcher." I disconnected, but the unease did not leave me. It sat heavy in my gut. Why did they not want me present? If grandmother was truly ill, they would want me home to say farewell. Telling me to remain away suggested that my presence constituted a threat. I turned to my laptop. I did not log into my work VPN. I knew better than to use company resources for personal investigation, at least not yet. Instead, I opened a private browser window. When I commenced college, grandmother Vivian had opened a joint checking account with me. It was intended for textbooks and emergency expenses. Over the last decade, I had barely touched it, leaving a few hundred in there just to maintain its activity, mostly out of nostalgia. I had not logged in for 6 months. I typed in my credentials, reset my forgotten password, and waited for the 2-factor authentication code. When the dashboard finally loaded, I expected to observe a balance of perhaps $200. Instead, I observed a number that caused the blood to drain from my face. The current balance was $31.50. That was normal, but the available balance history told a different story. I clicked on the transaction history tab, scrolling back to the beginning of the month. My eyes scanned the lines of data, monthly maintenance fees, a stray interest payment of a few cents, and then there it was. 2 weeks ago, December 10th, incoming wire transfer. The amount was staggering, $1 million exactly. The memo line was simple, typed in all capitals, "For Sloan Love Grandmother V." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs. Grandmother had not been hallucinating at the dinner table. She had actually done it. She had liquidated her assets and transmitted me a fortune. For 24 hours, I had been a millionaire, and I had not even known it. I scrolled up one line, December 11th, the very next day. Outgoing wire transfer. The amount was $999,700. It was a surgical extraction. Whoever had relocated the funds had left just enough behind to keep the account from reaching zero and triggering an automatic closure alert or an overdraft notification. They had emptied me out, leaving me with remnants. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number on the back of my debit card. It was late, but the 24-hour fraud line picked up after 3 rings. I gave them my social security number, my mother's maiden name, the name of my first pet. I was trembling, but my voice was the voice of Sloan Merritt, senior risk analyst. I was cold. I was precise. "I am examining a wire transfer on December 11th, I told the representative. "A woman named Michelle, who sounded fatigued. "I did not authorize this transaction. I need to know where it went." "1 moment, please," Michelle replied. I heard the clicking of keys. "All right, I see the transaction. It appears it was initiated in person at our Charleston branch." "In person?" I inquired. "I am in Washington State. I have been in Washington State for 6 months. It physically could not have been me." "I see," Michelle responded, her voice shifting from bored to cautious. "Well, Ms. Merritt, the notes here indicate the transfer was authorized by a co-signer, or rather an authorized representative. My grandmother is the only other person on the account," I stated. "Did Vivian Ashford sign for this?" "No," Michelle replied. "It was not Ms. Ashford. The system shows the transaction was executed under a power of attorney document on file." I froze. A power of attorney? That is impossible. My grandmother does not have a power of attorney. She refuses to sign them. She handles all her own finances. "Well, one was uploaded to our system on..." Michelle paused. "December 9th, just 1 day before the funds were deposited. The timeline was sickeningly perfect. The power of attorney was filed on the 9th. The money arrived on the 10th. The money was stolen on the 11th. It was a premeditated extraction. Someone knew the money was coming. Someone was waiting for it with a bucket to catch the water before it could reach me." "I need a copy of that document," I declared. "I am the joint account holder. If someone is acting on this account, I have a right to see the authorization. I cannot send you the document directly due to privacy regulations regarding the principal, Michelle recited the standard line. But I can tell you who the attorney in fact is listed as, the person who presented the document. Tell me, I whispered. I grabbed a pen and a notepad from my desk. I was ready to write down a stranger's name. I was ready to hunt down a scam artist, some slick con man who had deceived an 80-year-old woman. The power of attorney designates Cordelia Ashford, Michelle stated. The pen slipped from my fingers. Cordelia Ashford, my mother. Are you certain? I asked, my voice barely audible. Yes, ma'am. Cordelia Ashford. The identification provided matches the details on file. I thanked Michelle and disconnected the phone. I sat in the darkness of my apartment for a long time, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. The numbers blurred. $1 million gone. And the thief was the woman who had given birth to me. But it did not make sense. My mother was chaotic. Yes, she was poor with finances. Yes, she was vain and occasionally selfish. But she was not a criminal mastermind. She did not know how to structure wire transfers to avoid flags. She barely knew how to use online banking. The precision of the withdrawal, leaving exactly enough to keep the account alive, suggested a level of sophistication that Cordelia simply did not possess. She had done it. The bank confirmed so. But she had not done it alone. I spent the remainder of that night building my file. I captured screenshots of the transaction history. I downloaded the monthly statements going back 5 years to establish a baseline of normal activity. I created a timeline of events in a secure encrypted folder on my personal drive. I named the folder Holiday Recipes to ensure that if anyone glanced at my desktop, they would see nothing of interest. I did not contact the police. Not yet. I did not contact my grandmother. If I told her over the phone, the shock might actually end her, just as Thatcher had warned. And if I alerted my mother, she would have time to cover her tracks, to conceal the funds, to construct a better lie. No, I had to go home. I had to sit at that table, consume their turkey, drink their wine, and look them in the eye. I had to observe who squirmed. That was why I had flown to Charleston. That was why I had embraced my mother when I walked through the door. That was why I had thanked my grandmother for the $500, knowing full well it was a distraction. Now examining the fabricated check in my hand, the timeline in my head clicked into place with a terrifying finality. December 9th, mother files the power of attorney. December 10th, grandmother wires the $1 million. December 11th, mother steals the $1 million. December 24th, mother or someone assisting her fabricates a check for $500 and inserts it into grandmother's card to ensure I do not inquire about the missing fortune. They believed $500 was the price of my complacency. They believed I would be so grateful for a little travel money that I would not bother to check the balance of an old college account. I raised my gaze to my mother. She was pallid, her red lipstick now appearing like a garish wound on her face. She was not laughing anymore. You filed the power of attorney, I stated. It was not a question. Cordelia flinched as if I had struck her. Sloane, you do not understand. We were trying to protect her assets. We were trying to protect the family by stealing from me, I asked. It was never yours, she cried out, her voice cracking. She is not in her right mind. Giving $1 million to a single woman living in Washington state. It is irresponsible. We put it somewhere secure. Secure? I repeated. Where is it, Cordelia? Because the bank record shows it went to an external account. It did not go to a trust. It did not go to a savings bond. It went out. Cordelia opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted to the side. Not to Thatcher. Not to Garrison. She looked at Bennett. It was a micro-expression. A flicker of movement that lasted less than a second. But in my line of work, that flicker was everything. It was the tell. Why would my mother look at my brother's fiancé when asked about the funds? Bennett was a physical education instructor. He was the most unremarkable man I had ever met. He wore khakis and polo shirts and talked about protein intake. He had been in the family for 3 years, and in all that time, I had never seen him do anything more deceptive than cheat on a dietary plan. But Cordelia had looked at him, and now that I was paying attention, I saw that Bennett was perspiring. Not the nervous dampness of a bystander, but the profuse cold sweat of a man whose life was unraveling. I folded the fabricated check and slid it into my pocket. "You know what?" I declared, my voice dropping to a conversational tone that was far more dangerous than yelling. "I think we are finished eating. I think I am going to prepare some tea, and while the water boils, I am going to tell you exactly what is going to transpire next." I turned to my grandmother. "Grandmother, do not worry. I found the trail and I am going to follow it all the way to the conclusion." I walked out of the dining room, leaving the turkey cooling on the platter, and my family frozen in a tableau of guilt. The investigation was no longer digital. It was personal, and I was just getting started. I retreated to the guest bedroom, a space that used to be my sanctuary when I was a teenager. The walls were still painted a soft lavender, and my old high school debate trophies were gathering dust on the shelf. I locked the door, engaging the simple push-button lock that felt flimsy against the weight of the conspiracy unfolding downstairs. I could hear the muffled sounds of an argument in the dining room. My mother's shrill defensiveness, Thatcher's low murmur, the clinking of dishes being cleared by someone who was likely Garrison trying to disappear into domestic tasks. I sat on the bed and opened my laptop. The air in the room felt stagnant, preserving the ghost of the girl I used to be. But that girl was gone. In her place sat a lead investigator for Pinnacle Crest, and I had work to do. I did not log into my corporate network. Using company tools to investigate family members was a termination offense, and I was not going to lose my career over my mother's greed. I had to rely on open-source intelligence and the access I legally possessed as a joint account holder. I cracked my knuckles, a habit I had picked up during late-night audits, and pulled up the bank portal again. I navigated back to the wire transfer details. Earlier on my phone, I had only glanced at the summary. Now I downloaded the full transaction receipt, the PDF version that contained the raw metadata of the transfer. I scanned the document. The originating account was ours. The amount was $999,700. The date was December 11th. And there in the field labeled Beneficiary Information was the name I had been expecting to see, yet hoping I would not. Bennett Crane. I stared at the name. My brother's fiancé. The man who taught 10th grade physical education and coached the junior varsity wrestling team. My initial reaction was a surge of validation. The way Bennett had looked at his phone, the way he had perspired at the table, it all made sense. He was the recipient. He was the bagman. For a moment, I constructed a narrative where Bennett and Thatcher were the masterminds. Two young men tired of waiting for an inheritance, deciding to accelerate the process. But as I sat there, the investigator in me began to poke holes in that theory. It did not fit the profile. I had known Bennett for 3 years. He was a man of simple, almost painful transparency. He drove a 4-year-old Honda Civic and panicked if he received a parking ticket. He purchased his clothes at outlet malls. He was obsessed with his credit score, which he checked on an app every time we went out for dinner, bragging if it increased by 2 points. He was risk-averse. Embezzling $1 million required a level of criminal audacity that Bennett simply did not possess. You do not go from counting calories to laundering 7-figure sums overnight. Furthermore, if Bennett had stolen $1 million 2 weeks ago, why was he still wearing a watch with a cracked face? Why was he still driving a car that needed a new muffler? I needed to examine closer at the destination account. Using the routing number listed on the wire receipt, I identified the receiving bank as a regional credit union, one different from where grandmother banked. That was intelligent. It slowed down immediate internal flagging. I cross-referenced the account number with a few public database searches I utilized for personal verifications. I could not see the balance, but I could see the account origin data. The account in Bennett Crane's name had been opened on December 5th. I did the calculation. That was exactly 19 days ago. It was 4 days before the power of attorney was filed, 5 days before the money landed. This was a burner account. In the world of money laundering, you do not use your primary checking account for the dirty hit. You open a fresh one, clean and empty, ready to catch the payload. I examined at the address associated with the account opening. It was not the apartment Bennett shared with Thatcher on Magnolia Street. It was Unit 404 at 1200 Harbor Street. I opened a new tab and typed the address into the search engine maps. I switched to Street View. 1200 Harbor Street was not a condominium. It was a strip mall containing a vape shop, a dry cleaner, and a shipping center. Unit 404 was a private mailbox rental inside the shipping center. Bennett Crane, the man who listed his parents' home address on his wedding registry because he was afraid of porch pirates, had opened a bank account using a P.O. box. That was a red flag the size of a billboard. It suggested coaching. Someone had instructed him to do this, or someone had done it using his name. I dug deeper. If the money had reached Bennett's account on December 11th, it likely did not remain there. $1 million sitting in a fresh account at a small credit union triggers alarms. The bank's compliance officer would be asking questions about the source of funds within 48 hours. The money had to move. It had to be layered. I searched the South Carolina Secretary of State's business registry. If they were intelligent, they would try to wash the money through a business entity to make it appear like an investment or a purchase. I started searching for new filings in Charleston County within the last 3 weeks. There were dozens of new LLCs. I filtered by registered agents. Nothing jumped out. Then I tried a different angle. I searched for entities connected to the address 1200 Harbor Street, Unit 404. One result appeared. Palmetto Coastal Holdings LLC, date of formation December 12th, 1 day after the money arrived in Bennett's account. I clicked on the filing details. The company was a phantom. The registered agent was a generic commercial service in Colombia designed to conceal the true owners. The nature of business was listed vaguely as real estate investment and management. But every criminal makes a mistake. Every single one. Usually it is in the contact information provided to the registrar for billing purposes. They remember to conceal the owner's name, but they forget that the automated receipt has to go somewhere. I scrolled down to the bottom of the filing to the section labeled Organizer Information. The name listed was the commercial agent, but the email address for correspondence was not the agent's. It was Cordelia Ashford Designs. I stopped breathing for a second. It was not her primary email, the one she used for family newsletters. It was an old email she had set up years ago when she briefly tried to start an interior decorating business that never materialized. She probably believed it was defunct or obscure enough that no one would recognize it. But I recognized it. So, the money went from grandmother to Bennett, and then presumably from Bennett to this shell company, Palmetto Coastal Holdings, which was controlled by my mother. It was a classic laundering cycle. Placement, the wire to Bennett, layering, the transfer to the LLC, and now I needed to find the integration. Where was the money landing? You do not steal $1 million just to let it sit in an LLC. You steal it to purchase something. My mother's obsession had always been status. She wanted to be the matriarch of a wealthy family, even though she had never earned a dime of the wealth she coveted. I switched my search to county property records. If Palmetto Coastal Holdings was a real estate company, they were likely purchasing property. I searched the grantee index for Charleston County. Nothing for the LLC yet. Deeds are only recorded after closing. If they were in the process of purchasing, it would not be public record yet, unless they had filed a memorandum of contract, or if there was a construction lien, or I could try a darker, less reliable method. I went to the local MLS listings for Charleston and filtered for pending or contingent properties priced between $800,000 and $1 million. There were 3 hits. One was a commercial lot. One was a historic home downtown. The third was a beachfront property on Sullivan's Island. A stunning modern glass and steel structure listed at $1,200,000, but marked pending as of 3 days ago. I examined at the listing agent's notes. Cash offer accepted. Quick close requested. Cash offer, that fit. But I needed proof. I could not just guess. I went back to the bank activity. I needed to see if I could find a link between the LLC and a title company. I realized I was thinking too hard. I had access to something better than public records. I had the physical space of the house. I remembered the papers I had seen on the kitchen counter when I first arrived, the ones Mother had shoved into the junk drawer. At the time, I thought it was just clutter, Now I knew it was evidence, but I could not go downstairs yet. I had to finish the digital trail first. I went back to the Cordelia Ashford Designs email address. I ran a search on that handle across a data breach repository, a standard tool I used to see if a subject's email had been compromised in leaks. The email appeared in a recent breach of a local electronic signature platform used by real estate agencies in the Carolinas. It did not give me her password, but it gave me the metadata of her recent activity. She had received 3 documents to sign in the last 48 hours from a sender domain Low Country Title Escrow. I went to the Low Country Title Escrow website. It was a legitimate firm. On their Track My Closing portal, they required 2 things: a file number and the last 4 digits of the buyer's social security number. I did not have the file number, but I knew my mother's social security number. I had filled out her paperwork for Medicare supplements last year. I took a gamble. I typed in the last 4 digits of Cordelia's social. Then for the file number, I tried the property address of the beach house I had found on the MLS, 2208 Ocean View. Invalid. I tried the LLC name, Palmetto. Invalid. I sat back, frustrated. Then I remembered the specific date of the pending status, December 22nd. I typed in the date code 12225. The screen flickered and loaded. It was a generic closing status dashboard. I had guessed the temporary file ID generated by their lazy IT system. The screen displayed the transaction details. Property 2208 Ocean View. Boulevard, Sullivan's Island. Purchase price $1,100,000. Earnest money deposit $50,000 received from Bennett Crane. Balance due at closing $1,050,000. Wire to be received from Palmetto Coastal Holdings. Closing date, December 26th, tomorrow. My stomach turned. They were closing tomorrow. That was why Thatcher had called me. That was why they wanted me to stay away. They needed 24 more hours to turn grandmother's life savings into a beach house. But then my eyes drifted to the line labeled Buyer of Record. I expected to see the LLC. I expected to see a corporate veil, but I did not. The LLC was providing the funds. Yes, Bennett had provided the deposit. Yes. But the name on the deed, the person who would legally own the asset once the gavel fell tomorrow, was not a company. It was not the grandson who supposedly received the gift. The name listed as the sole owner was Cordelia Ashford. I closed the laptop lid, my hands trembling with a rage so cold it felt like hypothermia. It was not a family conspiracy to help grandmother. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a harvest. My mother was using her son's fiancé as a money mule, and her own mother as a piggy bank to purchase herself a vacation home she could never afford. Bennett was just a pawn. He was the layering step, the fall guy if the IRS came knocking. The LLC was the wash cycle. But the house was for Cordelia. I stood up. The silence in the house had deepened. The argument downstairs had stopped. I unlocked the door. I had the what, the how, and the who. Now I needed to find the why. And specifically, I needed to know if Bennett knew he was being used as a disposable buffer, or if he was naive enough to think he was part of the family. I walked to the door, my footsteps silent on the carpet. I had one more stop before I went back to the war room. I needed to see that printer in the kitchen. I needed to see the physical paper that tied the digital ghost to the reality of this house. The cliffhanger was not just that Cordelia was purchasing a house. It was that she was erasing everyone else from the equation. And tomorrow she was going to sign the final papers unless I stopped her. To understand the endgame, I have to take you back to the beginning of the arrival. Before the dinner, before the bombshell of the $1 million, there was the careful, suffocating choreography of my return to Charleston. I had landed at the airport with a smile painted on my face and a knot of dread in my stomach. The family group chat had been buzzing all morning with performative excitement. Gift emojis, photos of the tree, champagne glass icons. I played along, typing "cannot wait," while sitting in the back of a ride share, watching the familiar oaks of South Carolina blur past the window. I was a spy in my own history, armed with the knowledge of the stolen money but lacking the face-to-face confirmation I needed to strike. When I walked through the front door of the house on Wisteria Lane, The sensory overload was immediate. The smell of cinnamon and roasting meat was aggressive, a thick blanket designed to smother any tension. But underneath the holiday veneer, the house felt like a stage set where the actors were still frantically hiding the props from the previous scene. Sloane. My mother Cordelia was in the kitchen. She spun around as I entered, her movement too sharp, too jerky. She was standing over the kitchen island, which was covered in a stack of thick, legal-sized documents. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened in a flash of genuine panic before the mask of maternal warmth slammed down. "You are here early," she exclaimed, rushing towards me. But as she moved, her hand swept behind her, scooping the pile of papers and shoving them haphazardly into the junk drawer. A corner of a blue folder snagged, refusing to go in, but she hip-checked the drawer shut with a violent thud. "Just beat the traffic," I responded, letting her embrace me. Her hug was tight, vibrating with a nervous energy that felt like static electricity. She smelled of expensive perfume and stress sweat. "Well, go put your bags down," she instructed, pulling away and blocking my view of the kitchen counter with her body. "We are just getting things ready. It is a bit chaotic." "I can help," I offered, taking a step toward the counter. "No," she all but shouted. Then she forced a laugh. "No, sweetie, you are a guest. Go relax." Before I could press her, Thatcher appeared from the living room. My brother looked exhausted. His eyes were rimmed with red, and he was wearing a festive sweater that looked like it was choking him. "Sloane," he stated, coming over to me. He did not embrace me. He gripped my shoulders. "You made it. How was the flight? Was it delayed? Did you have to check a bag? Are you tired? You look tired. Maybe you should take a nap." The barrage of questions was not concern. It was an assessment of my alertness. He was checking to see if I was sharp enough to notice the cracks in the foundation. "I am fine, Thatcher," I responded, extricating myself from his grip. "The flight was easy. Why are you so worried about my sleep schedule?" "I just want you to have a good time," he stated, his smile tight. "We all do. Just relax." "All right, do not worry about anything." Then Bennett walked in. If Thatcher was the nervous handler, Bennett was the reluctant accomplice. He was wearing a crisp button-down shirt, but his posture was slumped. When he saw me, he offered a weak wave. "Hey, Sloane," he greeted. He did not make eye contact. His gaze was fixed on a point somewhere over my left shoulder. Before I could answer, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a harsh, insistent vibration. He flinched, pulling it out immediately. He stared at the screen for a fraction of a second, his face paling, before shoving it back in his pocket. "Sorry," he muttered. "I have to take this work thing." "On Christmas Eve?" I inquired. "Yeah, tournament logistics," he lied. I knew the wrestling season was on break. He turned and walked quickly towards the back porch, sliding the glass door shut behind him. Through the glass, I saw him answer the phone, his body language defensive, his hand chopping the air as if arguing with an invisible opponent. I left my bags in the hallway and walked into the living room. My stepfather, Garrison, was sitting in his armchair by the fire, dressed in his usual cardigan. He was not reading or watching television. He was just staring into the flames. Garrison had always been a quiet man, a stepfather who believed his role was to provide stability rather than discipline. We had a polite, distant relationship. But as I walked past him, he reached out and caught my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. I stopped and looked down at him. He did not look at me. He kept his eyes on the fire. "Garrison?" I asked softly. "Sloane," he responded, his voice a low rumble. "Tonight, just eat dinner." "What?" He turned his head slowly. His eyes were sad, filled with a resignation that chilled me more than my mother's panic. "Do not sign anything tonight, no matter what they put in front of you. Just eat dinner and then go home." He released my wrist and turned back to the fire, shutting down completely. My heart was racing. Do not sign anything. That was a warning shot. Garrison knew. He was not part of the scheme, but he was watching it happen, paralyzed by his own passivity. I needed to see grandmother. I went upstairs, bypassing my old room and heading straight for the master suite at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. Grandmother Vivienne was sitting in her wingback chair by the window, looking out at the bare branches of the magnolia tree in the front yard. She was dressed in her Sunday best, a deep blue dress with a pearl necklace. She looked regal but fragile. Grandmother. I knocked softly on the doorframe. She turned and her face lit up. It was the first genuine smile I had seen since entering the house. "Sloane," she exclaimed, holding out her hands. "Come here, child." I walked over and sat on the ottoman at her feet, taking her hands in mine. They were cold, the skin papery and thin. "It is so good to see you," she declared, squeezing my fingers. "I was afraid you would listen to Thatcher and stay away." "I would never miss Christmas," I assured. "How are you feeling?" "Thatcher mentioned the physician wanted you to have quiet." She scoffed, a flash of her old spirit returning. "That boy. He listens to your mother too much. I am fine. Old but fine. My heart is strong enough for dinner, Sloane. It is my head they are worried about." "Your head?" I probed gently. "They think I am losing it," she confided, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your mother. She has been so helpful lately. Too helpful. She comes over every day to sort the mail. She says paperwork confuses me now. She says it is better if she handles the bills so I can just rest." "And do you let her?" I inquired. "I did for a while," she admitted, looking away. "It was nice at first, not having to worry about the electric bill or the property tax. But then things started to feel wrong. I would ask to see a statement and she would say she lost it. I would ask about the dividends and she would say the market is down." She looked back at me, her eyes sharp. "I may be 81, Sloane, but I know how to balance a checkbook." I started to wonder if she was helping me or helping herself. "Grandmother," I ventured, deciding to take a risk. "Did you sign any papers for her recently? Maybe a power of attorney?" Vivian frowned. "She brought me a stack of papers last week. She said it was for the insurance updates to the policy. There were so many pages, Sloane. I tried to read them, but she was rushing me. She said the notary was waiting outside in the car and he was charging by the minute. So I signed where she pointed. My stomach clenched. That was it. The classic maneuver. Buried in a stack of insurance forms was the instrument of her own financial destruction. "But," Vivian continued, leaning in closer, "I am not as trusting as I used to be. After she left, I called the bank myself. I went down there the next day, and I made a transfer. The one I told you about. She was talking about the $1 million. But then it disappeared," she whispered. "And that is when I knew. I knew the war had started." She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small brass key. It was the key to the old decorative bird cage she kept on her dresser. The one she used to hide emergency cash in when I was a child. "Go to the bird cage," she instructed. "Open the little tin box inside." I put the receipt there, the one from the wire transfer I made. I hid it before Cordelia could find it. I took the key. "I will get it. There is something else in there too," she added. "A letter. I wrote it last night. I was feeling heavy. I wanted to put my thoughts down in case I could not say them." I walked over to the dresser. The bird cage was an antique filled with silk flowers. I unlocked the tiny door and reached in, my fingers brushing against the cold metal of a small tin. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside was the bank receipt, folded into a tight square. I unfolded it. It was legitimate. A wire transfer for $1 million, authorized by Vivian Ashford, dated December 10th. It was the physical proof that matched the digital ghost I had seen online. But beneath the receipt was a sheet of stationery. I unfolded that too. The handwriting was shaky but legible. "My dearest Sloane, if you are reading this, it means my fears were not the ramblings of an old woman. It means that the people I raised, the people I fed at my table, have betrayed me. I do not care about the money, sweetheart. I never did. I care that they think they can erase me while I am still here. I care that they think you are weak enough to be purchased. They will lie to you. They will tell you I am ill. They will tell you I gave it to them. Do not believe them. You are the only one who sees the world clearly. You are the only one who ever thanked me for the small things. Watch them tonight. Watch their hands. Watch their eyes. The truth is not in what they say. It is in what they hide. Love, Grandmother V. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket, right next to the fabricated check. A lump formed in my throat, hot and painful. This was not just a financial crime. This was a violation of dignity. They were treating her like a corpse before she had even taken her last breath. I closed the tin and locked the birdcage. I had what I needed. As I turned to leave the room, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I paused, listening. It was heavy, purposeful treading. I slipped out of the bedroom and into the hallway, moving silently toward the back stairs that led down to the kitchen. I wanted to see the scene of the crime, the junk drawer. The kitchen was empty for a moment. I could hear Mother in the dining room setting the table. I moved quickly to the counter where the printer sat. It was a sleek wireless model. I lifted the lid of the scanner bed. Sometimes people are careless. Sometimes in their haste to digitize a lie, they leave a trace. The glass was empty. But I examined the output tray. There was a single sheet of paper that had jammed, crinkled like an accordion at the back of the feed. I pulled it out carefully, trying not to tear it. It was a photocopy. A black and white scan of a document titled Durable Power of Attorney. The top half was clear. Principal Vivian Ashford, Agent Cordelia Ashford. But the bottom of the page, the section for the notary acknowledgement, was strange. The paper had been placed on the glass at an angle, cutting off the corner where the notary stamp should have been fully visible. I smoothed out the crinkled paper. I could see part of the stamp. E.N.T. Kingsley Commission expires 2026. I did not know a notary named Kingsley, but the name Rowan Kingsley rang a bell. He was not a lawyer. He was a financial consultant who advertised on late-night local cable, promising to help seniors protect their assets from the government. And there was something else on the signature line for Vivian. The ink looked too heavy, too thick. It looked like someone had traced over a faint line, or perhaps pasted a signature from another document and photocopied it to hide the cut lines. I heard the dining room door swing open. "Sloan," Mother's voice called out. "Dinner is almost ready. Come have some wine." I shoved the jammed paper into my waistband, covering it with my sweater. "Coming, Mother," I called back, my voice bright and cheery. I walked into the dining room. The table was set. The candles were lit. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, but now I saw the strings. I saw the panic in Thatcher's eyes as he poured the wine. I saw the guilt in Bennett's posture as he stared at his phone. I saw the desperation in my mother's smile, and I saw Garrison sitting in his chair, looking at me with a silent plea to just survive the night. I took my seat. I unfolded my napkin. "This looks lovely," I commented, and then I waited for the curtain to rise. I sat back down at the dining table, the linen napkin heavy on my lap. The air in the room was thick enough to choke on, perfumed with the scent of roasted meat and the metallic tang of adrenaline that coated my tongue. I had the physical evidence of the forgery in my pocket and the knowledge of the stolen $1 million in my head, but I did not flip the table. Not yet. In my line of work at Pinnacle Crest, you learn that prematurely revealing your hand is the quickest way to let a guilty party scramble for a cover story. You have to let them get comfortable. You have to let them think they have gotten away with it, because that is when they make mistakes. I needed to see who would dig the hole deeper. I took a sip of wine, watching my family over the rim of the glass. They were all vibrating with a nervous energy that they were desperately trying to pass off as holiday excitement. "Sloan, honey," my mother began, her voice bright and brittle. She stood up, smoothing the front of her red velvet dress. "Come help me in the kitchen for a second. I need to get the cranberry sauce, and I want to show you something." I set my glass down. "Sure, Mother." I followed her into the kitchen. The moment the swinging door closed behind us, cutting off the view of the dining room, her smile dropped. She did not move toward the refrigerator. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a long white envelope. "I almost forgot," she declared, her tone shifting to a casual, bureaucratic, breezy style that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. "Since you are here, I need you to sign this." It is just a standard form. We are doing some housekeeping on the family trust and the insurance policies. Just updating the beneficiary details since grandmother is, well, getting older. She slid a document out of the envelope and laid it on the granite countertop, handing me a pen in the same motion. Just right there at the bottom, she instructed, tapping a line with a manicured fingernail. It just confirms you are aware of the administrative changes. I examined the paper. It was titled Beneficiary Confirmation and Waiver of Notice. To a layman, it looked like boring legal boilerplate, but I read contracts for a living. I scanned the dense paragraphs, ignoring her finger tapping impatiently on the signature line. The language was deliberately opaque. It referenced consenting to the restructuring of liquid assets and waiving the right to contest prior transfers made by the acting power of attorney. It was not a beneficiary update. It was a retroactive permission slip. If I signed this, I would be legally validating everything she had done in the last 2 weeks. I would be signing away my right to sue her for the theft of the $1 million. She was trying to trick me into immunizing her against her own crime, using the cranberry sauce as bait. "Mother," I responded, keeping my voice light. "I have had a glass of wine. You know I never sign anything after drinking. Pinnacle Crest policy has brainwashed me." "It is not a contract, Sloane," she snapped, a flash of desperation cracking through her facade. "It is just a family form. Do you not trust me?" "Of course I do," I lied, smiling at her. "But I really need to read it properly. My eyes are tired from the flight. Let me take it upstairs later. I will sign it before I leave tomorrow." I saw the panic flare in her eyes. She wanted that signature now. She needed it before the closing tomorrow. "Just do not lose it," she warned, snatching the paper back but then hesitating. She could not force me. "Fine, later. But tonight." "All right. Tonight," I promised. She turned to grab the serving bowl from the counter. In that split second, while her back was turned, I pulled out my phone. The document was still sitting face up on the granite where she had hesitated. I snapped 2 high-resolution photos of the text, capturing the waiver of notice clause clearly. "Ready?" she asked, turning back around. "Ready," I confirmed, slipping my phone into my pocket. We walked back into the dining room. Thatcher was standing over Grandmother Vivian, holding a small orange prescription bottle. "Grandmother," Thatcher was saying, his voice oozing a sickly sweetness, "I really think you should take your evening pills now. Mother said the physician wants you on a strict schedule." He shook 2 pills into his hand. They were blue. I recognized them. They were her sleeping aids, usually reserved for insomnia. "Thatcher," Vivian objected, examining the pills with distaste. "It is 6:30 in the evening. I am not going to bed. We have not even had the pie." I know, Thatcher acknowledged, glancing nervously at the clock on the wall. "But they take a while to kick in. And you know how you get agitated when there are too many people. We just want you to be relaxed. It is for your own good." I watched his hand. It was shaking slightly. He was trying to sedate her. They did not want her talking during dinner. They were terrified she would say exactly what she had said to me in the bedroom, that the money was gone. If she was asleep or groggy, they could control the narrative. "I am perfectly relaxed," Vivian declared firmly, pushing his hand away. "Put those away, Thatcher," Mother said. Thatcher started, looking toward Cordelia for backup. "Thatcher," I cut in, my voice sharp. She said no. Let her eat her dinner. If she is tired later, she can take them. Thatcher examined me, his eyes wide and frightened. He looked like a child who had been caught playing with matches. He shoved the pills back into the bottle and shoved the bottle into his pocket. "Fine," he muttered. "I was just trying to help." I looked across the table at Bennett. He was pouring himself another glass of wine, filling it almost to the brim. He took a large gulp, his eyes darting around the room, landing on the windows, the door, anywhere but us. "Everything all right, Bennett?" I inquired. He jumped, splashing a little wine onto the tablecloth. "Yeah," he stammered. "Yeah, fine. Just work stress." He looked at Thatcher, then at Cordelia, and then he whispered, barely loud enough to be heard. "We just need to get through tonight." He stopped abruptly, his eyes locking with mine. He realized he had spoken the quiet part out loud. "Get through what?" I asked. "Nothing," Bennett responded quickly. "Just the holiday, you know. It is always busy." But I knew. Just need to get through tonight because tomorrow morning the escrow office opened. Tomorrow morning the wire transfer from the shell company would clear. Tomorrow morning the house on Sullivan's Island would officially belong to Cordelia Ashford, and the evidence would be buried under a mountain of closing documents. Suddenly a phone rang. It was not the festive jingle of a family call. It was a standard harsh ringtone coming from the sideboard where my mother had left her clutch. Cordelia froze. She examined the caller ID and her face went pale. "I have to take this," she announced, scrambling up from her chair. "It is the caterer for the brunch tomorrow." "I thought we were cooking brunch," Garrison commented, looking up from his plate. "No, Garrison. Just eat," Cordelia hissed. She grabbed the phone and practically ran into the hallway. I waited 3 seconds. "Excuse me?" I stated. I left my phone in my bag. I stood up and walked into the hallway. I did not go to my bag. I moved silently toward the gap between the hallway and the front sitting room, pressing my back against the wall. My mother was pacing in the dark sitting room, her voice a hushed, frantic whisper. "Rowan, why are you calling me now?" she hissed. "She is here. She is sitting right at the table." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. "No, she does not suspect anything," Cordelia declared. "She bought the story about the trust updates. I gave her the waiver. She is going to sign it tonight." Another pause. "Are you sure the funds are locked?" she asked, her voice trembling. "If she calls the bank, all right, good. Just have the papers ready at the escrow office at 9 o'clock. We will be there. I will bring the new POA just in case." She hung up. I stayed frozen against the wall, my mind racing. Rowan. She was not talking to a caterer. She was talking to her co-conspirator, and now I had a name. I slipped back into the dining room before she could catch me, sitting down just as she returned. She looked flushed, breathless. "Everything all right?" I asked. "Fine," she responded, forcing a smile. "Just a mix-up with the croissants." I picked up my phone under the table. I needed to know who Rowan was. I typed Rowan Financial Charleston SC into the search bar. The results populated instantly. Rowan Kingsley, Kingsley Wealth Solutions. I clicked on his website. It was slick, filled with stock photos of happy seniors on sailboats and vague promises about asset protection and legacy planning. But when I switched to a search for news articles and court records, the picture changed. There was a consumer alert from the Better Business Bureau from 2 years ago. Alert: Kingsley Wealth Solutions subject to multiple complaints regarding unauthorized restructuring of senior assets. There was a link to a local news story. Local financial advisor sued by estate for predatory lending. He was not a bank official. He was not a lawyer. He was a predator who targeted the elderly, convinced them to sign over control of their finances under the guise of protection, and then drained them dry through high-fee investments and complex real estate schemes. And he was working with my mother. I felt a cold realization settle over me. My mother was not intelligent enough to set up the shell company, the P.O. box, and the layered transfers on her own. I had given her too much credit. She was the vehicle, but Rowan Kingsley was the driver. He had found a desperate woman with a wealthy mother, and he had given her the blueprint to steal $1 million. But there was one final connection I needed to make. I thought back to the crumpled paper I had pulled from the printer earlier, the photocopy of the power of attorney with the bad signature. The notary stamp had been cut off, showing only E.N.T. Kingsley. I had assumed Kingsley was a last name of a notary. I zoomed in on the photo of Rowan Kingsley on his website. In the background of his office, on a bookshelf, was a large, distinct rubber stamp. I switched back to the photo I had taken of the jammed paper. The notary seal did not belong to an independent third party. The name on the stamp was Rowan Kingsley. In South Carolina, as in most states, a notary cannot notarize a document in which they have a financial interest. If Rowan was the one advising Cordelia, if he was the one brokering the real estate deal where the stolen money was going, he had a direct financial interest. Notarizing the power of attorney that allowed Cordelia to move the money was not just unethical. It was a felony. He had notarized his own crime. I raised my gaze from my phone. My mother was cutting her turkey, her hand shaking so badly the fork was rattling against the plate. Thatcher was staring at the pills in his pocket. Bennett was checking his watch. They were all terrified. They were all trapped in a scheme that was crumbling, and they were pinning their hopes on a criminal who had already left a paper trail a mile wide. I put my phone down on the table, screen down. "So," I declared, breaking the silence, "who is excited for tomorrow?" Cordelia looked up, her eyes wide. "Why? What is happening tomorrow?" "Christmas morning," I responded, smiling a smile that did not reach my eyes. "And whatever else the day brings." I saw Bennett swallow hard. I was not going to sign the waiver. I was not going to let grandmother take the pills. And I was certainly not going to let them get to that escrow office at 9 o'clock. But first, I had to survive dinner. And I had a feeling that the main course was about to be served with a side of absolute chaos. The dining room table had become a minefield, and I was the only one who knew where the tripwires were buried. The conversation had lulled into the rhythmic clinking of silverware against china, a sound that usually signified comfort, but tonight it sounded like the ticking of a bomb. I examined the check in my pocket, then at the faces of my family. My mother was aggressively buttering a roll. Thatcher was staring into his wine glass. Bennett was vibrating with anxiety. And Grandmother Vivian sat at the head of the table, her eyes sharp, waiting for the signal she did not know she had sent. I decided it was time to detonate the room. I stood up. The movement was sudden enough that Garrison paused mid-chew, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. I picked up my wine glass, tapping it gently with my fingernail. It made a hollow crystal sound. "I just wanted to say a few words," I announced, my voice steady, projecting the kind of calm authority I used when deposing a hostile witness. "It is so good to be back in Charleston, and I wanted to say a special thank you to grandmother." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope she had given me, holding it up so everyone could see the crisp white paper. "Thank you for the check, grandmother," I declared, looking directly at her. $500 is very generous. It will really help with the travel expenses." The reaction was instantaneous. Vivian, who had been in the middle of slicing a piece of turkey, froze. Her hand stopped moving. The knife remained buried in the meat. She did not blink. She did not breathe. She turned her head slowly to look at me, and the expression on her face was not the dementia-riddled confusion my mother had promised. It was the cold, hard shock of a woman realizing she had been played. She placed the knife down on the platter with deliberate, terrifying slowness. "What did you say, Sloane?" she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence of the room, it carried like a scream. "The check," I repeated, watching my mother's face out of the corner of my eye. Cordelia had stopped chewing. Her eyes were darting from me to Vivian. $500. Vivian stared at me. "Sweetheart," she uttered, her voice dropping an octave, becoming calm as frozen steel. "I wired you $1 million. Did you not receive it?" The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. My mother, Cordelia, laughed. It was a terrible sound, high-pitched and frantic, like a bird flying into a window. "Oh, Mother!" Cordelia cried out, reaching across the table to pat Vivian's hand. "You are confused again. It is the medication. Remember what Dr. Pemberton said? The new blood pressure pills can make you mix up your numbers. You are thinking of the play money we used for that game night last week. $1 million. Goodness, where would you even get that?" She looked around the table, her eyes pleading for backup. "She is having an episode. Thatcher, get her water." "I am not thirsty, Cordelia," Vivian responded. She did not look at her daughter. She kept her eyes locked on mine. "And I am not confused. I went to the bank on December 10th. I sat in Mr. Whitfield's office. I wired the money, the entire investment portfolio." "Grandmother, stop," Thatcher interrupted, his voice cracking. He had choked on his drink a moment earlier and was now wiping his mouth with a napkin, his face flushed. "You are embarrassing yourself. You do not have $1 million to give. You are on a fixed income." "I had it," Vivian declared, her voice sharpening. 2 weeks ago, and now Sloan is thanking me for $500. She turned her gaze to Cordelia. So tell me, Cordelia, who stole it from me at my table? Because if Sloan did not get it, someone else did. Nobody stole anything, Cordelia shrieked, slamming her hand down on the table. The silverware jumped. You are senile, Mother. You are imagining things. There was no wire transfer. I did not raise my voice. I did not yell. I simply leaned forward, resting my knuckles on the white tablecloth, and looked at my grandmother. Grandmother, I stated softly, cutting through Cordelia's hysteria. I need you to answer one question for me, and I need you to be absolutely certain. Vivian examined me. Ask me, did you sign a power of attorney document 2 weeks ago? I inquired. Did you sign a piece of paper giving Mother full control over your bank accounts, your estate, and your legal decisions? Cordelia gasped. Sloan, how dare you? Vivian did not flinch. No, she declared, her voice firm, hitting the word like a hammer. I did not. I have never signed a power of attorney. I told Cordelia specifically that I would not do it until I was in a hospital bed. She is lying, Cordelia yelled, standing up now. She forgets. She signed it right here on the kitchen table. Thatcher was here. Thatcher saw it. I examined Thatcher. He shrank into his chair, unable to meet my eyes. Thatcher? I asked. Did you see her sign it? Thatcher stammered. I saw papers. I do not know what they were. Mother said they were signed. She only signed Christmas cards, Vivian declared. That is all I have signed in months. Christmas cards and the check for my church donation. You are twisting everything, Thatcher suddenly snapped, finding his courage in anger. He turned on me, his face twisting into a sneer. This is what you do, Sloan. You come home once a year, and you act like you are better than us. You bring your work home with you. You are so obsessed with catching criminals that you think your own family is a syndicate. You are paranoid. You are seeing ghosts because that is all you do all day in Washington State. It is not paranoia if the money is missing, Thatcher. I responded calmly. There is no money, he shouted. It is a fantasy. Grandmother is old. She makes things up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I had already prepared the image in the gallery, a composite screenshot I had made upstairs. On the left side was the bank transaction history, showing the outgoing wire of $999,700. On the right side was the account opening data for Bennett Crane at the credit union. I am going to show you something, I announced, and I want you to look closely. I slid the phone across the polished wood of the table. It spun slowly and came to a stop right in front of Bennett. Bennett examined it. He did not want to look, but he could not help it. The screen was bright in the dim room. He saw the numbers. He saw the date. And then he saw his name. Account holder Bennett Crane. Date opened December 5th, 2025. Address, 1200 Harbor Street, Unit 404. Bennett's face went the color of ash. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over backward with a loud crash. I did not open that, he declared. His voice was trembling. That is my name. But I did not open that account. Bennett, sit down, Cordelia hissed, her eyes wide with panic. Do not look at her phone. It is fake. She photoshopped it. I did not open it, Bennett yelled, backing away from the table. He looked at Thatcher. You told me we were just holding money for the wedding. You said your mother gave us a gift. You never said anything about a secret account at a credit union. I bank at Wells Fargo. Bennett, shut up, Thatcher shouted. No, I interjected, my voice cutting through the noise. Keep talking, Bennett, because right now that wire transfer is in your name, which means when the FBI looks at this, they are not going to look at Cordelia. They are going to look at you. You are the one on the hook for grand larceny. Bennett examined me, then at Cordelia, his eyes filled with betrayal. You used my social. You used my identity. We were protecting the assets, Cordelia screamed. It was going to be for all of us, for the beach house, for the family. The beach house that is in your name, I asked, because I checked the deed. Mother, Bennett is not on it. Thatcher is not on it. Just you. Cordelia froze. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Vivian, who had been watching this disintegration with a look of profound sorrow, spoke up again. She picked up her wineglass, her hand shaking, but she took a sip before setting it down. I knew, she announced softly. We all turned to her. I knew something was wrong when the money disappeared, she continued. But I did not know who. I did not know if it was strangers or if it was you. She examined Cordelia. So, I wrote that check for $500 yesterday. I forged my own signature on it, just a little bit, to see if anyone would notice. But mostly I wanted to see your faces when Sloane thanked me for such a small amount. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. I wanted to see who would be relieved that the secret was safe. And when Sloane said $500, Cordelia, you let out a breath you had been holding for 2 weeks. Mother, please, Cordelia sobbed, collapsing into her chair. We are in debt. Rowan said this was the only way. He said we could pay it back with the rental income. Rowan? Vivian asked. That man on the television? He is a financial genius, Cordelia cried. He is helping us. He is helping himself, I declared. And he is using you to do it. Cordelia shook her head violently. No, you do not understand. He has a plan. We are closing tomorrow. It is all set. Once the house is ours, everything will be fine. She grabbed her phone from the table, her fingers fumbling with the screen. I have the confirmation right here. I will show you. It is a legitimate investment. She was frantic, tapping at her screen, trying to pull up an email to prove that she was a savvy investor and not a thief. She was swiping wildly, her hand shaking so hard she kept missing the icons. Look, she announced. I will cast it to the TV so you can all see the prospectus. You will see. She hit the cast button on her phone. The large smart TV mounted above the fireplace in the living room flickered to life. It was visible to everyone at the table through the wide archway connecting the rooms. The screen went black for a second, then mirrored Cordelia's phone display, but she had not opened the prospectus. In her panic, she had opened her inbox to the most recent email she had received, which had just arrived 2 minutes ago. The subject line was bold and clear in 40-inch high definition. Escrow confirmation urgent. Below it, the preview text was visible to the entire room. From Rowan Kingsley, Kingsley Wealth Solutions, to Cordelia Ashford. Cordelia, do not worry about the girl. I have the notary seal ready for the morning. Just get her signature on the waiver tonight, or forge it like the last one. We close at 9 o'clock. The house will be in our names by noon. Remember, I get 40% equity as agreed. The room went silent. It was not just a house for Cordelia. It was a partnership, and the email explicitly commanded her to commit forgery. Cordelia stared at the TV, her face draining of all color. She scrambled to disconnect the phone, tapping the screen frantically. But in her haste, she dropped the device. It clattered onto the hardwood floor, cracking the screen. But the image on the TV remained, frozen on the damning evidence. Our names, I read aloud, my voice flat. Cordelia Ashford and Rowan Kingsley. I examined my mother. He is not your advisor, Mother. He is your partner in crime, and he is taking almost half of grandmother's money for himself. Cordelia looked up at me, and for the first time there was no anger in her eyes, only terror. He said, she whispered. He said it was standard fees. 40% is not a fee, I declared. It is a heist. I stood there, the evidence glowing on the screen behind me, the ruined dinner in front of me, and the realization hitting everyone that the betrayal went deeper than just family greed. We had let a wolf into the fold, and he was waiting for us at the escrow office tomorrow morning. The image on the television screen burned into the room like a brand. The words, 40% equity, and forge it like the last one hung in the air, stripping away the last shreds of plausible deniability my mother had clung to. The silence that followed was not the stunned silence of the dinner table. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a family that had just been severed at the root. Grandmother Vivian was the first to move. She did not scream. She did not throw her wine glass. She simply placed both hands on the edge of the table and pushed her chair back. The scrape of wood against wood was a harsh, definitive sound. "Sloane," she declared. Her voice was thin, trembling with a mixture of shock and a terrible, icy rage. "Take me to the living room. I cannot sit at this table a moment longer." I was at her side in an instant. I offered her my arm, and she gripped it with surprising strength. Her fingers dug into my bicep, anchoring herself against the vertigo of betrayal. "Mother, wait," Cordelia stammered, scrambling up from her chair. She reached out, her hand hovering in the air, desperate to bridge the gap she had created. "You have to understand. You are upset. You need to rest. The physician said any excitement is dangerous. Sloane is making you agitated." Cordelia tried to step between us, her face a mask of frantic denial. She looked like she was trying to herd a stray cat back into a cage. "Let me take you upstairs. I will explain everything. It is just a misunderstanding. Sit down, Cordelia." The voice came from the fireplace. It was Garrison, my stepfather, the man who had spent 20 years blending into the upholstery, the man who chewed his food 30 times before swallowing, the man I had written off as a piece of furniture. He stood up. He did not look like a furniture piece now. He stepped in front of Cordelia, blocking her path to Vivian. He was not aggressive, but he was immovable. He was a wall of beige wool and quiet disappointment. "Garrison!" Cordelia gasped, examining him as if he had suddenly grown a second head. "Move! I need to help my mother." "Let her speak," Garrison responded. His voice was low, devoid of anger, but heavy with a finality I had never heard from him. "You have done enough helping. Let her speak to Sloane." Cordelia stopped. She examined Garrison, then at the glowing TV screen that still displayed her conspiracy, and she seemed to shrink. She slumped back against the sideboard, covering her mouth with her hand. I guided Vivian into the living room. The Christmas tree was twinkling in the corner, its multicolored lights reflecting off the ornaments she had collected for 50 years. It felt perverse, this festive backdrop to a financial execution. I helped her into her favorite wingback chair, the one with the floral upholstery that smelled of lavender and old paper. "Water," she whispered. "I will get it," I offered. "No," she declared sharply, grabbing my wrist. "Do not leave this room. Do not leave me alone with them. Use the pitcher on the side table." I poured her a glass of water. She took a sip, her hand shaking so hard the water sloshed over the rim, darkening the blue silk of her dress. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Call the bank," she instructed. "Now." "I was going to call the police," I responded, reaching for my phone. "Grandmother, this is fraud. This is elder abuse. We need a police report to stop the closing tomorrow." "No police," she declared firmly. "Not tonight. I do not want sirens in my driveway on Christmas Eve. I do not want the neighbors watching my daughter being handcuffed on the front lawn. Grandmother, she stole $1 million, I argued gently. "I know what she did," Vivian snapped, her eyes flashing. "But she is still my daughter, and if we call the police now, I lose control of what happens next. I want the money stopped. I want the accounts locked, but I want to do it my way. Call the bank." I respected the decision. It was a tactical error in my book, but it was her life. I dialed the emergency fraud hotline for the bank. It was late, Christmas Eve, but major banks maintained 24-hour security desks for high-net-worth clients and wire fraud. I put the phone on speaker so she could hear. The hold music was a tiny synthesized jazz tune that grated on my nerves. "Pinnacle Crest Risk Department has a direct line," I muttered. "I could call in a favor." "No," Vivian responded. "We do it by the book." A representative picked up. "Fraud prevention. This is Marcus. How can I help you?" "My name is Sloane Merritt," I announced, switching into my professional cadence. "I am the joint account holder on an account ending in 4589. I am sitting here with the primary account holder, Vivian Ashford. We are reporting an unauthorized wire transfer of $999,700 executed on December 11th. We are also reporting that the power of attorney on file was obtained fraudulently and is currently being used to facilitate further theft. I gave him the social security numbers, the verification codes, the mother's maiden name. I used the specific keywords that trigger immediate compliance protocols: elder financial exploitation, identity theft, imminent loss of funds. I see the transaction, Marcus confirmed, his voice tightening. And I see the power of attorney note. You are saying this was not authorized? The principal is right here, I declared. Speak, grandmother. I did not authorize it, Vivian announced, her voice clear and strong. And I did not sign that paper. Freeze it all, young man. Freeze every penny. If a single dollar moves out of that account, or any connected account, I will sue your bank into the ground. Understood, Ms. Ashford, Marcus replied. I am placing a code red lock on the account immediately. I am also flagging the beneficiary account for review. No funds will be released. We will launch a formal investigation the day after Christmas. I hung up. The immediate bleeding had been stopped, but the money was already out of the main account. It was sitting in the escrow limbo, or in Bennett's sham account. It is done, I announced. They cannot move the money tomorrow. Vivian leaned back, closing her eyes. She looked 10 years older than she had an hour ago. Thank you. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. It was followed by a cheerful, rhythmic knocking, shave and a haircut, 2 bits. I examined the clock on the mantel. It was nearly 9 in the evening. Who came to visit at 9 o'clock on Christmas Eve? I heard Cordelia gasp in the dining room. I heard the scuffle of feet. Do not answer it, I called out, standing up, but it was too late. I heard the heavy oak door creak open, and then I heard a voice that was smooth, rich, and dripping with synthetic charm. Merry Christmas. I know it is late, but I was in the neighborhood dropping off gifts for my favorite clients, and I saw the lights were still on. I walked to the archway separating the living room from the foyer. Standing in the entryway was a man I recognized instantly from his website, Rowan Kingsley. He was wearing a camel haircoat that looked softer than butter, a cashmere scarf draped artfully around his neck, and a smile that showed too many teeth. He was holding a magnum of expensive red wine in one hand and a gold-wrapped box in the other. He looked perfect. He looked successful. He looked like a predator who had come to check on his trap. Cordelia was standing by the door, looking like she had seen a ghost. She was pale, shaking, clearly terrified that her 2 worlds, the victim daughter and the co-conspirator, were colliding. Rowan, she whispered, you should not be here. Nonsense, Rowan responded, stepping into the house uninvited. He wiped his feet on the rug with exaggerated politeness. I just wanted to bring something for Vivian. Is she up? He looked past Cordelia and saw me standing in the archway. His eyes flickered over me in assessment, a calculation, before settling on the warm smile again. You must be Sloane, he declared, extending a hand that was perfectly manicured. Cordelia talks about you all the time. The investigator from Washington State. Impressive work. I did not shake his hand. I crossed my arms. You are bold, Rowan, I responded. Or you are stupid coming here tonight. Rowan's smile did not waver, but the corners of his eyes tightened. Excuse me? We saw the email, I declared. The one you sent Cordelia. The one about the 40% equity. The one about the forgery. It was cast to the living room TV. For a second the mask slipped. Just a fraction. A flash of genuine alarm passed over his face, but he smoothed it over instantly. He was a professional con man. He knew how to pivot. Ah, he acknowledged, lowering his hand. He set the wine bottle down on the entry table. Well, that is unfortunate. Electronic communication can be so blunt. It lacks nuance. He walked past me, heading straight for Vivienne. I stepped in his path, blocking him. Get out of my house, I declared. Sloane, please, Rowan responded, his voice dropping to a confidential, reasonable tone. Let us not make a scene. I am here to help your grandmother. Truly. Cordelia came to me because she was drowning in debt. She was worried about the estate. We structured a deal that would save the family home and generate income. By stealing $1 million, I asked. Not stealing, Rowan corrected gently. Reallocating. Vivian was keeping that money in low-yield bonds. It was dying on the vine. I moved it into high-growth real estate. The beach house is a gold mine. It will pay for Vivian's care for the next 20 years. And yes, I take a fee. I take equity because I am putting my own reputation on the line. He looked over my shoulder at Vivienne. Vivienne, hello. You look lovely. I am sorry about the confusion. Your daughter was just trying to do the right thing. Vivienne opened her eyes. She examined him with a gaze that could have stripped paint from a wall. You are the man from the commercial, she declared. I am, Rowan confirmed, beaming. Kingsley Wealth Solutions. You are a thief, she responded. Rowan sighed, a sound of patient suffering. This is the problem with these situations. Emotions get high, narratives get twisted. Sloan, you are a professional. You understand that sometimes to save a portfolio, you have to take aggressive action. I have a question for you, Rowan, I announced. If this is all above board, if this is just aggressive portfolio management, why did the money have to go through a credit union account opened by a gym teacher? Rowan froze. It was the one detail he had not prepared for. He knew about the LLC. He knew about the escrow. But he'd likely assumed Bennett was a silent, willing participant, or that I had not dug deep enough to find the layering account. I'm not sure what you mean, he responded, blinking. Bennett Crane, I declared. My brother's fiancé. You or Cordelia, under your instruction, opened an account in his name at a credit union on December 5th. The money went there first, then to the LLC. Why layer it, Rowan? Why wash the money if it is a legitimate investment? Rowan licked his lips. He examined Cordelia, who was cowering by the door. He realized the containment breach was total. He decided to go on the offensive. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat. For a second, my heart hammered, wondering if he was reaching for a weapon. But he pulled out a folded document. You want to talk about authorization, he declared, his voice hardening. You want to talk about fraud. Let us talk about memory loss, because I have this. He unfolded the paper and held it up. He did not hand it to me. He held it up like a shield. This is a consent to transfer assets, Rowan declared. Dated December 1st, signed by Vivian Ashford, notarized by an independent agent in Colombia. It explicitly authorizes the creation of the Palmetto Coastal LLC and the funding thereof. He turned the paper so Vivian could see it. Look at the signature, Vivian, he challenged. Is that your signature? I stepped closer, squinting at the document. The signature at the bottom was not the shaky, slurry mess that was on the $500 check. It was not the sharp forged attempt I had seen on the Power of Attorney photocopy. It was perfect. It had the sweeping flourish on the V, the disconnected Y, the precise slant. It looked exactly like the signature on my birthday cards from 10 years ago. It was undeniable. Cordelia stepped forward, examining the paper with confusion. I never saw that one. You did not need to, Rowan responded smoothly. Vivian signed it in my office. She came to see me. She forgets, of course. That is why we are here. That is why Cordelia had to take over, because Vivian agrees to things one day and forgets them the next. He examined me, a smug triumph in his eyes. You can freeze the accounts, Sloan, but I have a signed contract, and if you stop this closing, I will sue this estate for breach of contract, and I will win. The signature is real. I examined Vivian. My stomach dropped. Had she forgotten? Was it possible that in a moment of confusion or coercion, she had actually signed this? Vivian leaned forward. She squinted at the paper. She examined the signature for a long, agonizing minute. Then she looked up at Rowan. Her face was pale, drained of blood, but her eyes were wide with a terrifying realization. That is my signature, she whispered. Rowan smiled. See, I told you. But Vivian continued, her voice gaining strength. I have never seen that piece of paper in my life. You just said it is your signature, Rowan responded, losing patience. It is, Vivian confirmed, pointing a shaking finger at the document. It is my signature from 1998. It is the signature I used on your grandfather's death certificate. She examined me. I remember it because the pen skipped on the A. I remember that little gap in the ink. I have looked at that copy of the death certificate every day for 20 years. It sits on my vanity. She looked back at Rowan. You did not forge my signature, young man. You photocopied it. You lifted it from a public record death certificate and pasted it onto your lies. The room went dead silent. Rowan lowered the paper slowly. The smugness vanished, replaced by the cold reptilian stare of a man who realized he had just walked into a trap of his own making. And now, Vivian declared, leaning back into her chair, I think you should leave my house before Sloane changes her mind about calling the police. Rowan left the house with the casual arrogance of a man who believes he is untouchable, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him like the seal on a vault. He left behind a silence that was heavier than the one at dinner. It was the silence of a battlefield after the shelling has stopped, where the survivors are just beginning to count the casualties. I did not sleep. The concept of sleep seemed laughable, a luxury for people whose families were not imploding. Instead, I turned the kitchen island into a forensic lab. The rest of the family had dispersed to various corners of the house. Vivienne to her room with the door locked. Thatcher to the back porch to smoke cigarettes he thought we did not know about. Bennett to the guest room, presumably to call a lawyer. Cordelia had locked herself in the master bath, and I could hear the faint, rhythmic sound of water running as if she were trying to wash the evening away. I made a pot of black coffee strong enough to strip paint and opened my laptop. I had work to do. First, I needed to technically verify what grandmother Vivian had spotted with her naked eye. I had managed to snap a high-resolution photo of the document Rowan had flourished, the consent to transfer with the signature lifted from my grandfather's death certificate. I uploaded the image to my photo editing software and zoomed in to 400%. To the naked eye, a signature is just ink on paper. To a digital forensic analysis, it is a landscape. I switched to the negative filter. There it was. Around the flourishes of the V and the A, there was a faint, jagged halo of pixelation, a ghostly gray border where the background of the original document had been imperfectly erased before being pasted onto the new one. It was a digital artifact known as trash, leftover noise from a scan. Furthermore, the pressure of the pen was uniform. A real signature has valleys and peaks, where the pen presses harder on the downstroke. This was flat. It was a stamp, a two-dimensional lie. I saved the analysis. Exhibit A, Sloane. I jumped slightly. Garrison was standing in the kitchen doorway. He was wearing his plaid bathrobe, looking more like a ghost than a man. He held a stack of envelopes in his hand, bound together with a rubber band. Garrison, I acknowledged, rubbing my eyes. I am busy building a case. I know, he responded softly. He walked over to the island and placed the stack of envelopes on the granite right next to my laptop. I think you need these. What are they? The mail, Garrison explained. For the last 6 months, I have been getting to the mailbox before Cordelia. I saw things, notices, final warnings. I hid them in the garage because I did not know how to confront her. I just hoped she would fix it. He examined his hands, ashamed. I was a coward, Sloane. I let it happen. I picked up the first envelope. It was from a credit card company. Past due. Immediate action required. I opened it. The balance was $42,000. I opened the next one. A personal loan provider. Default notice. And then the third one. A letter from Kingsley Wealth Solutions. It was not a bill. It was a statement for an account titled Cordelia Ashford High Yield Futures Fund. I scanned the activity. 6 months ago, Cordelia had deposited $80,000, likely a home equity line of credit she had taken out on their house without telling Garrison. The statement showed aggressive speculative trades, options, futures, high-risk gambles, and then the crash. The balance on the statement was negative, not zero. Negative. She owed the brokerage. She owed Rowan over $60,000 in margin calls. The picture was clearing up. It was not just greed. It was desperation. She invested with him. I whispered, examining Garrison. He promised her she would get rich. He promised her she could be the matriarch who paid for everything. She wanted to be like Vivian, Garrison acknowledged sadly. She wanted the power. And when she lost it all, I continued, realizing the mechanism of the trap. Rowan did not foreclose on her. He offered her a way out. I could hear Rowan's voice in my head, smooth and predatory. Do not worry, Cordelia. We can wipe this debt away. We can fix the margin call. We just need to access some underutilized capital. Your mother's accounts are just sitting there. He had leveraged her debt to turn her into a thief. Where is Thatcher? I asked suddenly. On the porch, Garrison replied. I grabbed the stack of letters and walked out the back door. The night air was freezing, biting through my thin sweater. Thatcher was sitting on the swing, the cherry of his cigarette glowing in the dark. Thatcher, I called out. He flinched, dropping the cigarette and crushing it under his boot. I do not want to lecture, Sloane. I am not here to lecture you, I responded. I am here to show you how you were played. I tossed the letter from Kingsley Wealth Solutions onto his lap. What is this? He asked, squinting in the dim porch light. That is Mother's investment account, I explained. She lost everything. Thatcher, she owes Rowan Kingsley more money than you make in 2 years. That is why she needed the $1 million. It was not a gift. It was a bailout. Thatcher stared at the paper. But she told me Grandmother wanted us to have it. She sat me down and cried. She said Grandmother was scared of the government taking it for taxes and wanted to give it to us early. She said it was our inheritance, and you believed her because you wanted to. I responded gently. You wanted the beach house. You wanted the easy life. I thought I was helping, Thatcher whispered, his voice breaking. She made me feel like I was protecting the family legacy. She said if we did not move the money, the nursing home would take it all. And Bennett? I asked. Did he know? Thatcher shook his head vigorously. No. God, no. Bennett is terrified of breaking rules. Mother asked for his social security number months ago. She said she was adding him to the life insurance policy as a beneficiary since we are getting married. He gave it to her because he trusts her. She used it to open the burner account, I declared. She made him an accessory to a felony without him even knowing. Thatcher put his head in his hands and began to sob. It was a messy, ugly sound. The sound of a man realizing his mother had sold him out to save her own skin. Go inside, I instructed him. Wake up Bennett. Tell him to get his own lawyer, not a family friend, a real criminal defense attorney. He is going to need it to prove he was a victim of identity theft and not a co-conspirator. Thatcher nodded, wiping his face, and ran inside. I went back to the kitchen. I had the motive. I had the method. I had the fake signature. But as I scrolled through the bank records I had downloaded earlier, not just the wire transfer but the detailed monthly statements, I noticed something else. The $1 million was the finale, but the show had started long before that. I filtered the transaction history for the last 18 months. I was looking for small recurring payments that might have slipped under the radar. I found a pattern. Starting a year and a half ago, there were monthly checks written from Vivian's account for amounts ranging from $2,000 to $3,000. The memo lines were always innocent: medical transport, home health aid, physical therapy copay. The payee was a company called Senior Care Logistics. I ran the name. It was a registered LLC, but it had no website, no reviews. The address was a UPS store in Columbia. I cross-referenced the dates of the checks with my own calendar. I had a shared family calendar where Mother would post updates about Grandmother's appointments. June 12th, Mother taking Grandmother to eye doctor. Check cleared. June 13th, $300 to Senior Care Logistics. August 4th, Mother taking Grandmother to heart specialist. Check cleared. August 5th, $450 to Senior Care Logistics. I felt a wave of nausea. Cordelia had been charging her own mother for the rides she gave her. She had set up a fake vendor to bill Vivian for the time and gas of being a daughter, and likely inflating the costs by 500%. I printed the list of transactions. I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling heavy. I knocked on Vivian's door. "Come in," she responded. Her voice was weak. I entered. She was sitting up in bed, still wearing her blue dress, staring at the wall. "Grandmother," I announced, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I found something else, and it is going to hurt." I showed her the list. I explained the fake company. I explained that every time Cordelia had driven her to the doctor, every time she had picked up a prescription, she had written herself a check from Vivian's account to pay for it. Vivian took the paper. She put on her reading glasses. She ran her finger down the list of dates. "August 4th, she whispered. We stopped for ice cream after the doctor. I bought her a sundae. I told her how grateful I was that she took the time off work to drive me. She looked up at me and her eyes were dry, but the pain in them was infinite. She charged me for the ride, Sloan. She turned my gratitude into an invoice. "She has been bleeding you dry for 18 months, I confirmed. The $1 million was just the final harvest. This was the daily tax. Vivian crumpled the paper in her hand. I trusted her. I thought she did it because she loved me. "She might love you," I responded, though the words tasted like ash. "But she loves the money more. Or maybe she is just so deep in the hole with Rowan that she stopped seeing you as a mother and started seeing you as an ATM. Vivian took a deep breath. She smoothed out the crumpled paper and placed it on the nightstand. "Get the file, Sloan," she instructed. "Put it all together. The checks, the fake signature, the email from the TV, everything." "I am," I confirmed. "I have enough now for a RICO case. We have wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy." I stood up to leave, to go back to my laptop and finalize the timeline for the authorities. But as I passed the desk in the corner of the room, the desk where Cordelia had helped with the paperwork, I saw a tablet. It was an old iPad that Cordelia had given grandmother to play solitaire on. It was pinging with a notification. I glanced at the screen. It was synced to the family calendar, the one Cordelia managed. A reminder had just popped up for tomorrow morning, December 26th, 8:30 in the morning. Emergency hearing, competency, guardianship. I froze. I tapped the notification to open the details. There was an attachment, a PDF of a court filing. I opened it. It was a petition filed by Cordelia Ashford, with an affidavit signed by, who else? Rowan Kingsley, acting as a concerned financial advisor. The petition claimed that Vivian Ashford was suffering from advanced dementia, was making reckless financial decisions, citing the imaginary $1 million, and was being manipulated by an estranged granddaughter from out of state. It requested an emergency ex parte order, granting Cordelia Ashford immediate temporary guardianship over Vivian's person and estate. If the judge signed this tomorrow morning, everything I had done would be undone. Cordelia would have legal authority to override the bank freeze. She would have legal authority to ban me from the house. She would have legal authority to sign the closing documents for the beach house on Vivian's behalf. "Sloan," Vivian asked, seeing my face. "What is it?" I turned to her, the blood draining from my face. "They are not just going to the escrow office tomorrow," I announced. "They are going to court." "Court?" "They filed for guardianship, grandmother," I declared, my voice shaking with fury. "They are going to tell a judge that you are insane. They are going to tell a judge that I am manipulating you, and if they win, by noon tomorrow, Cordelia will own you. She will own your house, your money, and your freedom." I examined the clock. It was 3 a.m. "We have 5 hours," I announced. "We have 5 hours to prepare for the fight of our lives. We are not going to the escrow office. We are going to that hearing." I grabbed the iPad. "Get dressed, grandmother," I instructed. "We have a war to win." The sun had not yet risen when I pulled my rental car out of the driveway, the tires crunching softly on the gravel. Beside me, Grandmother Vivian sat in the passenger seat, clutching her purse with white-knuckled intensity. She was dressed in a sharp navy blazer and trousers, an outfit she usually reserved for board meetings at the Charity League. Today, she was wearing it to fight for her life. We were not going to the escrow office. We were headed to the law offices of Prescott Holloway, a firm specializing in elder law that I had found through a frantic search of the state bar directory at 4 a.m. Mr. Holloway, a man with a voice like gravel and a reputation for being a bulldog, had agreed to meet us at 6:30 after I sent him the digital dossier I had compiled. "You look tired, Sloane," Vivian observed, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "I am running on caffeine and spite," I replied. "How are you holding up?" "I am angry," she declared, "and anger is a much better fuel than sadness." We met Holloway in his office, a room that smelled of old leather and expensive cologne. He was a short, stout man who listened to our story without blinking. When I showed him the fraudulent guardianship petition Cordelia had filed, his face darkened. "They are trying to ambush you," Holloway declared, slamming a file folder shut. "They filed an ex parte motion. That means they want the judge to grant temporary guardianship without you being there to contest it. They are banking on the fact that you are an out-of-town relative and that Vivienne is too frail to appear." "She is not frail," I responded. "Then let us go prove it," Holloway declared. "I know Judge Crawford. He does not like being used as a weapon in family feuds." We arrived at the Charleston County Courthouse just as the doors were unlocking. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 8:30 in chambers. We were there at 8. When Cordelia walked in 10 minutes later, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he had been hired from a billboard advertisement, she stopped dead in her tracks. She was wearing a soft pastel cardigan and no makeup, clearly curated to look like the exhausted, caring daughter. But when she saw Vivian sitting upright on the bench next to me, her carefully constructed mask of martyrdom slipped. "Mother," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" "I am here to tell the truth, Cordelia," Vivian responded coldly. "You should be in bed," Cordelia hissed, stepping forward. "You are confused. Sloane, what have you done? You are parading her around like a prop." "Save it for the judge," I responded. The hearing was held in a small wood-paneled conference room. Judge Crawford sat at the head of the table, reviewing the petition Cordelia had filed. He looked over his reading glasses at the assembly. "This petition claims that Mrs. Ashford is suffering from severe cognitive decline and is in imminent danger of financial ruin due to the influence of a granddaughter," the judge summarized. He examined Cordelia. "Ms. Ashford, you are asking for immediate control over all assets." "Yes, Your Honor," Cordelia confirmed, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "It breaks my heart to do this. My mother is not herself. She hallucinates large sums of money. She thinks she has $1 million to give away. My daughter Sloane arrived yesterday and has been feeding these delusions, trying to get access to accounts that simply do not exist. I just want to protect my mother. I want to make sure she has a roof over her head." She wiped a tear from her eye. It was a compelling performance. If I did not know she had $40,000 in credit card debt and a pending real estate closing at 9 o'clock, I might have believed her. "I see," the judge acknowledged. He turned to Vivian. "Mrs. Ashford, your daughter says you are confused about your finances. Do you know what day it is?" Holloway, our lawyer, started to object, but Vivian raised her hand. "It is Friday, December 26th, Judge," Vivian declared clearly. "It is the day after Christmas, and I am not confused about my finances. I know exactly how much money I have, or rather how much I had until December 11th. "And how much was that?" the judge inquired. "I had $1,240,000 in liquid assets spread across a municipal bond ladder and a high-yield savings account," Vivian recited. "I wired $1 million of that to a joint account with my granddaughter 2 weeks ago, because I discovered my daughter was charging me $300 every time she drove me to the pharmacy." Cordelia gasped. "That is a lie. She is making it up." "I have the bank records, Your Honor," Holloway announced, sliding a thick binder across the table. "We also have evidence of a pattern of unauthorized transfers disguised as vendor payments to a shell company controlled by the petitioner." The judge opened the binder. He flipped through the pages I had prepared, the timeline, the fake senior care logistics checks, and the email from the TV screen. "This is extensive," the judge muttered. "Your Honor," Cordelia's lawyer interrupted. "These are fabrications created by the granddaughter. She works in risk management. She knows how to manipulate documents." Suddenly, the door to the conference room opened. We all turned. Bennett Crane walked in. He looked like he had not slept in a week. He was pale, unshaven, and he was not alone. He was accompanied by a severe-looking woman in a black suit. "Who are you?" the judge asked, annoyed. "I am representing Mr. Bennett Crane," the woman announced. "We are here to file an affidavit regarding the account mentioned in these proceedings." Cordelia stood up. "Bennett, what are you doing?" "Go home." Bennett did not look at her. He looked at the judge. "I did not open that account," Bennett declared, his voice shaking but audible. "The one with the $900,000 in it? I have proof." His lawyer handed a document to the judge. "Your Honor, this is a sworn statement from the credit union. The account was opened using Mr. Crane's social security number, but the address listed is a P.O. box that Mr. Crane has never rented. Furthermore, the signature card on file does not match Mr. Crane's driver's license. We have a handwriting expert's preliminary analysis confirming it is a forgery." The judge examined the document, then at Cordelia. "Ms. Ashford," the judge declared, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "Did you open an account in your future son-in-law's name without his permission?" "It was a family arrangement," Cordelia stammered, sweat breaking out on her forehead. Bennett knew. "He is just scared because Sloane threatened him." "I did not know," Bennett countered, his voice gaining strength. "You asked for my social for the life insurance. You stole my identity, Cordelia." Cordelia looked frantically around the room. Her eyes landed on Thatcher, who was sitting in the back corner, trying to make himself invisible. "Thatcher," she cried, Tell them we did this for grandmother." Thatcher looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. He examined his mother. Then he examined me. He saw the way I was holding grandmother's hand. He saw the way Bennett was looking at him with absolute disgust. Thatcher stood up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I cannot do it, Mother," he whispered. "Thatcher, do not say a word," Cordelia's lawyer warned. Thatcher ignored him. He walked up to the judge's table and placed his phone down. "Read the texts," Thatcher instructed. "From last night and from last week." The judge picked up the phone. "Who is Rowan?" the judge asked. "He is her financial advisor," Thatcher explained, his voice breaking. "He told us what to do. He told Mother to get the power of attorney signed, even if she had to trick grandmother. He told me to call Sloane and tell her not to come home. He texted me last night and said..." Thatcher took a shuddering breath. "He said to give grandmother the blue pills so she would be asleep and could not talk to Sloane." The room went silent. This was no longer a civil dispute. This was a conspiracy. "He also said," Thatcher continued, tears streaming down his face, "that if we did not get the house closed by today, he would foreclose on Mother's debt and take everything we own." Cordelia sank into her chair, burying her face in her hands. It was over. The narrative she had built, the caring daughter, the senile mother, the greedy granddaughter, had been dismantled brick by brick. "Rowan Kingsley," the judge read from the screen. "Is that the man's name?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Rowan Kingsley of Kingsley Wealth Solutions." Mr. Holloway spoke up. "Your Honor, my office ran a quick background check on Mr. Kingsley this morning. It appears he is currently named as a defendant in 3 other civil suits in neighboring counties. The pattern is identical. He targets families in distress, offers to restructure their assets, and drains the accounts through unnecessary real estate transactions, where he takes a massive commission. He is a predator," Vivian declared, her voice cutting through the legal jargon. "And I was supposed to be his retirement fund." The judge took off his glasses. He examined Cordelia with a mixture of pity and revulsion. "Ms. Ashford, I am denying your petition for guardianship with prejudice. Furthermore, I am issuing an immediate temporary restraining order preventing you from accessing any accounts bearing Vivian Ashford's name. I am also ordering an emergency freeze on the assets of the Palmetto Coastal LLC and the account at the credit union." He turned to the bailiff. "Contact the district attorney's office. I want a fraud investigator here within the hour, and get me the address for this Kingsley Wealth Solutions." "He is at the escrow office," Cordelia whispered. She looked up, her face streaked with mascara. "He is waiting for me at Low Country Title. We were supposed to sign at 9. I checked my watch. It was 8:55. He is waiting for the money," I announced. The judge slammed his gavel. Court is adjourned, but nobody leaves this room until the sheriff arrives, except for the victim and her counsel. As we walked out of the conference room, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was an alert from my banking app, the one linked to the joint account I shared with grandmother, but it was not a deposit. I stopped in the hallway, pulling out my phone. It was a notification from the bank's fraud department, but it was forwarded with a high-priority flag. Alert pending transaction. Origin Low Country Title. Escrow Trust Account. Destination Kingsley Offshore Holdings. Cayman. Amount $999,700. Status pending. Authorization required. My blood ran cold. The money was not in the credit union account anymore. Rowan had already moved it to the escrow account in anticipation of the closing. And now, realizing that Cordelia was not coming, realizing that the house of cards was falling, he was trying to bypass the real estate deal entirely. He was trying to wire the funds straight from the escrow account to an offshore shell company. He was cutting and running. "What is it?" Holloway asked, seeing my face. "He is not waiting for the closing," I explained, showing him the screen. "He is trying to steal the principal right now. He has access to the escrow account." "The judge just ordered a freeze," Holloway reminded. "The freeze takes hours to propagate through the banking system," I responded. "Especially for a wire transfer that is already queued. He just needs one final authorization to release the hold." "Whose authorization?" Vivian asked. "The buyer," I replied. "Cordelia." But Cordelia was in the courtroom, detained by the bailiff. Then I remembered the photocopy, the one with the pasted signature. He does not need Cordelia, I realized, feeling a sick dread in my stomach. He has grandmother's signature. He has the forged consent form. If he presents that to the escrow officer, they will think grandmother authorized the release of funds back to him as the investment manager. I examined Vivian. "He is at the escrow office right now," I declared. "He is going to walk in there, hand them a piece of paper with your stolen signature on it, and walk out with $1 million before the police even get into their squad cars. Then we have to stop him," Vivian announced. She tightened her grip on her purse. "Drive, Sloan. Drive fast." We ran to the car. The courthouse was only 10 minutes away from the escrow office, but in the world of wire transfers, 10 minutes was an eternity. The money was sitting in a digital purgatory, hovering between recovery and total loss. Rowan was greedy. That was his weakness. He could have run an hour ago when Cordelia did not show up, but he could not leave the $1 million behind. He was gambling that he could sign one last paper and disappear before the system caught up to him. I started the engine and peeled out of the parking lot. The final confrontation was not going to be in a courtroom. It was going to be across a desk covered in closing papers, with the ghost of $1 million hanging in the balance. The glass doors of Low Country Title escrow slid open with a pneumatic hiss that sounded far too polite for the violence we were about to inflict. I walked in first, flanked by Mr. Holloway and Grandmother Vivian. The lobby was a sterile expanse of white marble and abstract art, the kind of place designed to make the transfer of massive wealth feel clinical and boring. But at the reception desk, the energy was anything but calm. Rowan Kingsley was standing there. He was leaning over the high counter, his camel hair coat unbuttoned, pointing a manicured finger at a document on the desk. He was speaking low and fast to a young woman who looked like she was about to cry. "Stop the wire!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the glass walls. Rowan spun around. For a split second, I saw the raw animal panic in his eyes before he smoothed his face into that terrifyingly perfect mask of professional concern. "Sloan," he acknowledged, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace of pain. "And Vivian. I am glad you are here. I was just finalizing the reversal. I wanted to make sure the funds were returned to the management account before the legal confusion set in." He was lying. I could see the screen behind the receptionist. The transfer destination was still listed as Kingsley Offshore Holdings. Mr. Holloway stepped forward, holding the court order like a weapon. "We have a temporary restraining order and an asset freeze issued by Judge Crawford 40 minutes ago. If you touch that keyboard, young lady, you will be an accessory to federal wire fraud." The receptionist snatched her hands away from the computer as if the keys were red hot. Rowan laughed, but it was a dry, hollow sound. This is ridiculous. I have a signed authorization right here. Vivian signed it. It allows me to move funds for asset protection purposes. He waved the document, the one with the photocopied signature, in the air. Vivian walked up to him. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace that made her look 10 feet tall. "Let me see it," she instructed. Rowan hesitated, then handed her the paper. "See your signature? Dated December 1st. Vivian examined the paper. Then she examined the receptionist. "My name is Vivian Ashford, and I want to see the security log for December 1st. Rowan stiffened. "What?" "I want to see the camera footage," Vivian commanded, her voice ringing out like a bell. "If I came in here and signed this document in front of a notary as you claim, then I will be on the tape. Pull it up now." The receptionist examined Rowan, then at Mr. Holloway. Mr. Holloway nodded. "Do it, or explain to the sheriff why you deleted evidence." The young woman typed frantically. A moment later, she turned the monitor so we could all see. Date December 1st, time 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The video feed was grainy, but the faces were clear. The door opened. Rowan Kingsley walked in. He was guiding a woman by the elbow. It was not Vivian. It was Cordelia. She was wearing a scarf wrapped around her head and large sunglasses, trying to look inconspicuous, but there was no mistaking her nervous, jerky movements. I watched as the on-screen Cordelia sat down. I watched as Rowan slid a piece of paper across the desk. I watched as Cordelia hesitated, her hand shaking, before she signed it. "That is not me," Vivian declared, pointing at the screen. "That is my daughter, and she is forging my name while you stand there and supervise." The front door slid open again. 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies walked in, followed closely by the bailiff from the courthouse who was escorting Cordelia. She was not in cuffs yet, but she looked like a broken woman. Her face was streaked with tears. Her posture collapsed. When she saw the video paused on the screen, the frozen image of her crime, she let out a sob that sounded like something tearing. "I had to," Cordelia screamed, her voice cracking. "He made me." Rowan backed away toward the wall. "Cordelia, shut up. Do not say another word." "He told me he would take the house," Cordelia cried, turning to Vivian. She pointed a shaking finger at Rowan. "He showed me the loan papers. He said he had a lien on our house. He said if I did not get control of your money by the end of the year, he would foreclose and throw Garrison and me on the street. He said it was the only way to save the family." "I did no such thing," Rowan scoffed, adjusting his cuffs. "I merely advised you on your options." "You wrote the script," Cordelia yelled. "You told me to wear the scarf. You told me to cut the notary stamp off the photocopy. You told me to drug her dinner." The deputies moved in. They did not go for Cordelia. They went for Rowan. "Sir, put your hands behind your back," the lead deputy instructed. "Wait," a voice called out from the doorway. It was Thatcher. He had driven here separately, desperate to intervene. He ran into the lobby, breathless. "It was me," Thatcher shouted, stepping between Rowan and the police. "I did it. I set up the accounts. I signed the papers. Leave them alone. Take me." I examined my brother. He was shaking, terrified, but trying to do the one thing he thought a man was supposed to do, protect his mother. It was a noble, stupid gesture. "Thatcher, stop," I commanded, grabbing his arm. "No, I did it," Thatcher insisted. The deputy examined Thatcher, then examined the stack of evidence Mr. Holloway was holding. "Son, we have text messages from this man's phone to yours, giving you step-by-step instructions on how to gaslight your grandmother. We have IP logs showing the accounts were accessed from his office. You are not the mastermind. You are just a pawn. Step aside." Thatcher sagged, the fight draining out of him. He examined Cordelia, who was weeping silently now. He had tried to save her, but the truth was too heavy to lift. The deputies cuffed Rowan. For the first time, his composure shattered. "You cannot do this," he shouted as they dragged him toward the door. "I have rights. That signature is valid. She owes me that money. It is my commission." His voice faded as the squad car doors slammed shut outside. The lobby fell silent. The receptionist was typing furiously, presumably reversing the wire transfer before she lost her job. Cordelia was sitting on a bench, her head in her hands, while a deputy read her rights. She would face charges: fraud, forgery, conspiracy. She would likely serve time or at the very least spend years on probation. The beach house was gone. Her reputation was gone. But the money was safe. The manager of the title company came out, sweating profusely. "Mrs. Ashford," he announced, his voice trembling, "I have just confirmed the recall of the wire. The $999,700 is being returned to your primary account as we speak. We are terribly sorry for this oversight." Vivian did not look at him. She was examining the empty doorway where Rowan had been taken away. Then she turned to me. There was a look in her eyes I had not seen before. It was not relief. It was a profound, weary satisfaction. "You asked me a question at dinner, Sloane," she declared softly. I examined her. "What question?" "You asked me if I was sure I had sent the money," she continued. "You thought I was confused. You thought I had been tricked into sending it and then forgetting." I nodded. "I thought they had gaslit you into believing you had done it." Vivian smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I did send it, Sloane. I sent it knowing full well that Cordelia had compromised my account. I sent it knowing that Rowan was watching the balance like a hawk. I stared at her. Why? Why would you send $1 million if you knew they were going to steal it?" "Because I needed them to commit the crime," she explained. She walked over to the window, looking out at the parking lot where Cordelia was being led to a separate car. "I have known for months that Cordelia was stealing from me," Vivian continued. "The small checks, the fake vendors. But it was small enough that she could deny it. She could say it was for expenses. She could say I forgot. It was her word against mine. And who believes an 80-year-old woman over her devoted daughter?" She turned back to me. "I knew Rowan was pulling the strings. I knew they were planning something big. If I had confronted them with the small thefts, they would have just covered their tracks. They would have called me senile and gotten the guardianship anyway. I would have lost everything slowly. Death by 1,000 cuts." She took a deep breath. "So I gave them a target they could not resist. I wired the $1 million. I dangled the bait. I knew Rowan would get greedy. I knew he would try to move it all at once. And I knew that to move that much money, they would have to leave a paper trail that not even the best lawyer could hide." I stood there stunned. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The check for $500, the dinner, the confusion. "The $500 check," I whispered. "You gave that to me to force the confrontation," Vivian finished. "I knew that if I thanked you for $500 in front of them after they had just stolen $1 million, they would panic. They would have to react. I needed them to turn on each other in public. I needed you to see it." She reached out and touched my cheek. "I am sorry I had to use you as the trigger, Sloane, but you were the only one honest enough to ask the right questions." I examined my grandmother with a new sense of awe. She had not been a victim. She had been the sting operator. She had risked her entire fortune on a single gamble that their greed would outweigh their caution, and she had won. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Cordelia pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of fraud in exchange for testifying against Rowan. She avoided prison time but received 5 years of probation and was ordered to pay restitution for the money she had stolen over the last 18 months. She moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. We did not speak much after that. Thatcher was charged as an accessory but received community service and a suspended sentence. Given his cooperation and the evidence of manipulation, he broke up with the idea of the easy life and started working double shifts at a warehouse trying to pay off his own debts. Bennett was cleared of all charges. He broke off the engagement with Thatcher 2 weeks later. He changed his bank, his phone number, and as far as I know, he moved to a different state to restart his life away from the Ashford drama. And Rowan Kingsley went to federal prison for 15 years. That evening, after the police statements were filed and the bank accounts were secured, I drove Vivian back to the house on Wisteria Lane. The Christmas tree was still lit, casting a warm glow on the empty living room. We sat in the kitchen drinking tea. The house was quiet. The tension was gone, replaced by the heavy silence of a family that had been pruned down to the healthy wood. I watched Vivian sign a new stack of papers, this time legit documents prepared by Mr. Holloway. She was revoking the old power of attorney. She was placing her assets into an irrevocable trust with an independent corporate trustee. She was ensuring that no one, not even family, could ever touch her security again. She put the pen down and looked at me. "You saved me, Sloane," she declared. "No, grandmother," I responded, shaking my head. "You saved yourself. I just drove the car." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was firm, her skin warm. "I did not give you that money to make you rich, Sloane," she explained, her blue eyes piercing through me. "I did not send that wire transfer just to catch them. I sent it because I wanted you to have it. And once the dust settles, the trust will transfer it back to you properly this time." "I do not need it, grandmother," I protested. "Take it," she insisted. "Not for the luxury, but for the leverage. I gave it to you so you never have to stay in a room you do not want to be in. I gave it to you so you are never dependent on someone who might lie to you." She squeezed my hand. "I gave it to you so you can be free from those who see family as a wallet." I squeezed back. I left Charleston that night. I did not stay for the rest of the holiday. There was nothing left to celebrate, and everything left to rebuild. I drove to the airport under a sky full of cold, bright stars. I sat in the terminal, watching the planes take off, feeling the weight of the check in my pocket. Not the fake $500 one, but the promise of the future. I had won, but it was not the kind of victory that made you want to cheer. It was the kind of victory that made you stand up straighter, breathe a little deeper, and walk through the security gate without looking back. The truth had been called by its name. The debt had been paid, and for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly who I was and what I was worth. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So, please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Sloane and Vivian's plan. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit that notification bell to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.